On October 15, 1981, Herok Stone was found in her home while her daughter was at school. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death.
In the peaceful town of Carmel, a terrible event unfolded on October 15, 1981. Sonia Carmen Herok Stone, a 30-year-old single mother from Quebec, was tragically killed in her own home. This horrifying incident occurred during the daytime while her 4-year-old daughter was at school. On that particular Thursday, Sonia's friend Carolyn McBride decided to visit her around noon. Little did she know, she would be faced with an unimaginable scene. Sonia's lifeless body was discovered sprawled on the living room floor, with a pair of pantyhose tightly wrapped around her neck. What events occurred on that fateful day when Sonia met her untimely death? How did the perpetrator gain access to her home? And what led to her tragic end? Carmel by the Sea, commonly called Carmel, is a picturesque coastal town nestled in Monterey County, California. It is known for its captivating beauty and idyllic charm. With a population of approximately 4,000 residents, Carmel maintains a small-town atmosphere. The town's low crime rate contributes to its reputation as a safe haven, with a violent crime rate of 1.14, which is well below the national average. Little did the residents of the serene coastal town of Carmel, California know that it would become the haunting backdrop for the chilling case of Sonia Carmen Herok Stone. Born in 1951 to Anthony Harakunioka and Stella Harakunioka, Sonia Carmen Herok Stone led a life that spanned across different places. Originally from Quebec, Canada, Sonia made the decision to relocate to Carmel, California in the 1970s. It was in this picturesque coastal town that she found herself building a new chapter of her life. Sonia's journey took another significant turn when she married Michael Stone, and together they welcomed a daughter into the world in 1976. However, their marital union eventually came to an end, leading to a divorce prior to the tragic events that unfolded in 1981. Sonia also worked as a merchandiser for Levi Strauss & Company. On October 15, 1981, a Thursday in Carmel, Sonia Carmen Herok Stone's 4-year-old daughter went to school, not knowing what was about to happen to her mother. Meanwhile, Sonia paid a visit to a relative before returning home sometime after 10 a.m., as revealed by records from the Farmer's Almanac. Against the backdrop of a cold winter day, with a mean temperature hovering around 57 degrees, the stage was set for a tragedy that would forever scar the tranquil town. As the day wore on, a dear friend of Sonia, Carolyn McBride, decided to drop by her home around noon, innocently expecting a routine visit. Little did she know that she would stumble upon a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her days. Inside Sonia's residence, her lifeless body lay sprawled on the living room floor. The garments she once wore were disheveled, with her shirt and jacket unnaturally pulled back. A pair of pantyhose was fashioned into a deadly ligature, strangling the life out of her. Sonia's lifeless body lay among the spilled contents of her purse, making the scene even more stark. While investigators were initially inclined to believe that the motive behind this heinous crime was assault, doubts and uncertainties crept into that narrative. The investigation into Sonia Carmen Herok Stone's tragic murder presented a perplexing puzzle. The scattered contents of her purse raised suspicions of a possible robbery, but the exact items taken from the house remained elusive, shrouding the case in uncertainty. However, a glimmer of clarity emerged with the generation of the autopsy report. The findings confirmed the harrowing theory put forth by the police. Sonia had been strangled to death. The chilling realization sent shivers down the spines of those involved in the investigation. According to the report, Sonia met her untimely demise on the morning of October 15, 1981. During the examination of her body, another intriguing detail emerged. The ring fingernail on Sonia's left hand was broken, and inside the fragment resided traces of blood. This discovery brought a flicker of hope to the investigation, as the presence of blood under her fingernail hinted at the potential for additional DNA evidence. However, due to the limited efficiency of the forensic technology available at the time, extracting and analyzing this DNA evidence posed significant challenges. In the aftermath of the harrowing murder, investigators wasted no time in launching a comprehensive series of interviews with the individuals connected to Sonia's life, as well as her neighbors. As the threads of the investigation slowly unraveled, suspicions began to point towards a neighbor residing just across the street from Sonia's residence. This neighbor, Michael Glazebrook, emerged as a person of interest in the eyes of the investigators. Michael Scott Glazebrook, then 25 years old and married, had recently moved into the neighborhood, taking up residence in the house adjacent to Sonia's just a few months before the tragic event. It was during these crucial interviews that investigators detected a sense of unease and nervousness in Glazebrook's demeanor. Furthermore, they noticed a striking 3 to 4 inch vertical scratch adorning his right cheek, adding weight to their suspicions. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to align as inconsistencies in Glazebrook's alibi surfaced. Initially, he claimed to be at his father's house during the time of the murder. As investigators dug deeper, it was revealed that Glazebrook was a college student at the time and worked as a carpenter. Deputy District Attorney for Monterey County, Matthew Herok, shed light on the intriguing dynamics between Sonia and Glazebrook. They had no prior connection or knowledge of each other, leaving investigators puzzled as to the motive that might have driven Glazebrook to commit such a heinous act. Friends and neighbors of Sonia were unable to establish any meaningful link between the victim and the suspected perpetrator, deepening the mystery surrounding the tragic events that unfolded on that fateful day in Carmel, California. On December 18, 1981, 2 months after the chilling murder of Sonia Carmen Herok Stone, the Monterey County Sheriff's Office made an arrest. Initially, Glazebrook was held without bail in the Monterey County Jail on charges of murdering Sonia. However, just a few days later, he was unexpectedly released, and it was reported in the newspaper that charges will not be filed against him. Dean Flippo, the assistant district attorney at the time, stated that insufficient evidence had hindered the case against Glazebrook. 7 months later, in July 1982, the police rearrested Michael Glazebrook. It was revealed that the investigators had disagreed with the initial assessment of the assistant district attorney, who believed there was not enough evidence to hold Glazebrook and proceed to trial back in December of 1981. However, the investigators patiently awaited a change in the district attorney's office, and when a new deputy district attorney took the position, they presented their case once again. The new deputy district attorney approved the arrest, and in July 1982, a felony arrest warrant was issued for Michael Glazebrook at his new residence in Pacific Grove, which is located about 5 to 7 miles north of Carmel by the sea. On July 23, 1982, Glazebrook was apprehended by the Pacific Grove police, and bail was set at $250,000. Since Glazebrook couldn't afford legal representation, a public defender was assigned to his case. In an August 1982 hearing, the defense argued for a reduction in bail, emphasizing that Glazebrook was not a flight risk, having been the main suspect since December 1981 and never leaving Monterey County. They further contended that he posed no risk to the community. The judge agreed and lowered Glazebrook's bail from $250,000 to $50,000. The preliminary hearing began in November 1982, 4 months after Glazebrook's second arrest, and a year since the murder of Sonia. During this hearing, the prosecution had several crucial tasks at hand. They needed to detail the sequence of events leading to Sonia's death, establish Glazebrook as the alleged perpetrator, and present enough evidence to demonstrate probable cause. It is important to note that the standard of proof at a preliminary hearing is less stringent than at a trial. The prosecution must show probable cause or reasonable grounds to believe the defendant committed the crime, whereas a trial requires evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. During the preliminary hearing, Dr. Edward Blake, a serologist, testified that he examined blood and urine from the victim but found no evidence of assault. Another expert, Dr. Boyd Stevens, a coroner and chief medical examiner, stated that he was proficient in reconstructing assault scenes and testified that the observed bruising on the victim was consistent with and indicative of assault. A pivotal witness called to testify was Michelle Wilson, a friend of the accused murderer. Wilson had previously informed investigators about a conversation she had with Glazebrook, in which he purportedly admitted to being inside the victim's home on the day of the murder. She also claimed to have seen a scratch on Glazebrook's face, which he attributed to an argument at Monterey Peninsula College the day after the murder. However, when Wilson took the stand, she unexpectedly changed her story, stating that the passage of time had made her uncertain about the details of the conversation. She denied ever mentioning the conversation to investigators, leaving the prosecution surprised. The prosecution countered this by having one of the sheriff's detectives testify about the information Wilson had previously shared, challenging her recantation. It is important to note that during further research and testimonies at the trial, discrepancies emerged between witnesses' accounts and the investigators' records. While these inconsistencies may not be directly related to the case, they complicate the understanding of events surrounding this particular instance. Despite this setback, the judge determined that there was sufficient probable cause to proceed with charges against Glazebrook and move forward with the trial. In February 1983, a request was made in Monterey County Superior Court to dismiss all charges against Glazebrook due to a lack of evidence. The judge presiding over the hearing based his decision on the preliminary hearing transcript and concluded, like the original judge, that there was sufficient probable evidence to proceed with a trial. However, the judge expressed doubts about the prosecution's ability to convict Glazebrook beyond a reasonable doubt. In another hearing held in June 1983, the judge granted a motion by the defense to exclude incriminating statements made by Glazebrook to the police. These statements, if used during the preliminary hearing, may have contributed to establishing probable cause. Nevertheless, these statements were deemed inadmissible in court, leading to the dismissal of charges against Glazebrook. However, this dismissal was short-lived, as Glazebrook was arrested again for murder in July 1983. This arrest, coming almost 2 years after Sonia was found murdered, undoubtedly caused emotional turmoil for the victim's family and loved ones. The case involved numerous hearings and appeals, involving nearly every judge in Monterey County, adding further strain to the family's grieving process. The new arrest triggered a new preliminary hearing and the appointment of a new public defender for Glazebrook. The subsequent hearing lasted only 3 days, yet it was determined that there was enough probable cause to proceed to trial. It appears that this new arrest did not stem from new information or evidence, meaning that the same issues faced by the prosecution in the previous trial would persist. One significant obstacle for the prosecution was the exclusion of the statements made by Glazebrook to the police, which were obtained through secretive and illegal means during the investigation. It was revealed that Glazebrook's arrest on existing traffic warrants, conducted by homicide investigators rather than traffic officers, was a ruse to question him without formally arresting him for the murder. The judge deemed this arrest improper and ruled that any evidence or information gathered during that arrest was inadmissible in court. The trial finally commenced in November 1983, and on the first day, several neighbors of Sonia and Glazebrook were called to the stand by the prosecution. The aim was to establish Glazebrook's presence in the area during the time of the murder, which was believed to have occurred between 10:15 a.m. and 12 p.m. on the day Stone was found dead. However, the defense argued that Stone may have arrived home closer to 11 a.m., presenting conflicting testimonies from neighbors about Glazebrook's whereabouts that morning. Glazebrook's father testified that he saw his son at home around 11 a.m. on the day of the murder. Glazebrook was there to move his belongings to his new home in Carmel. Glazebrook's parents also confirmed that they did not observe any scratches on their son's face that day, a time period that would have been after the murder took place. Michelle Wilson, a witness who previously testified, was called back as a hostile witness by the prosecution. She maintained her denial of making statements about a conversation she had with Glazebrook to the police, consistent with her testimony during the preliminary hearing. An emergency room doctor testified that he had treated a scratch on Glazebrook's face, which occurred the day after the murder. However, the doctor expressed doubt that the scratch was caused by human fingernails. Additional testimonies included those of investigators who claimed Glazebrook had told them that the scratch resulted from contact with a piece of plexiglass while he was working on a boat in the backyard. A bar owner testified that she saw a man. According to the witness, she claimed that on Thursday of the murder she saw a man who resembled Glazebrook in her bar that night. This man also had a scratch on his face. However, when investigators contacted her a year later, she felt uncomfortable singling out a specific person from the bar. She could only provide a general description. This information highlights one of the main challenges faced by the prosecutors in the trial. The investigation may not have been conducted thoroughly. Many witnesses testified differently from what investigators claimed to have learned from them during their initial interviews. The discrepancies arise because the investigators destroyed their written records after typing them up, and the defense wanted access to the original records. The judge ruled that there was no malicious intent in destroying the records, but the discrepancies remain. Glazebrook's parents, for example, stated that no notes were taken during their interviews, while investigators disagreed. There were gaps between witness testimonies and the notes kept by investigators, which could be attributed to memory issues. Moreover, some witnesses seemed to retract their previous statements. Two notable examples were when an investigator mentioned the scratch on Glazebrook's face and his nervousness during the interview as reasons for suspicion, despite these details not appearing in the investigator's notes. Another example was when an investigator claimed that the bar owner couldn't positively identify Glazebrook, contradicting what was written in the investigator's notes. With the inability to use evidence obtained during the illegal arrest and concerns about the investigation itself, the case was not a straightforward one. The trial ended in a mistrial as the jury was deadlocked with a vote of 9-3 in favor of acquittal. The three jurors who held out became significant for any future trial. If Glazebrook had been found not guilty, investigators would not be able to arrest him again, regardless of the evidence. In 2020, the Monterey County Sheriff's detectives decided to revisit the case, prompted by the district attorney's office taking another look at it. While Glazebrook went free, The case remained unsolved and continued to be remembered by the Monterey County Sheriff's Department. Herok explained that back in 1983, DNA testing was not available, and the only method they had for genetic identification was blood typing. According to Lee Haynie, the introduction of DNA evidence was crucial in this case. It provided the strongest direct proof linking Glazebrook to the murder. Stone, a family member, expressed deep appreciation to the investigative team, stating, "The family would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to this team. Sonia was an amazing woman, and we are relieved to see justice served for her." Glazebrook's sentencing was scheduled for April 26, 2023. Since the murder of his wife, Sonia Carmen Herok Stone, on October 15, 1981, Michael Stone has faced numerous obstacles on his path to healing. In addition to dealing with the trauma, Stone has had to endure unfounded rumors accusing him of his wife's murder, despite being cleared of any charges by authorities. Now, thanks to advancements in DNA technology, Stone can finally embark on the healing process. Stone recounted that when the Monterey County Sheriff's Office arrived at Sonia's home in Carmel by the Sea on October 15, 1981, and discovered that she had been assaulted and strangled to death, the law enforcement officials contacted him, as he had been living and working in Marin County at the time. They informed him of an accident, prompting him to immediately drive to Carmel. "Upon arrival, I found out that I was considered a suspect," Stone shared, expressing that he was informed that his wife's father was searching for him and was armed. "The most devastating thing was that Sonia's mother wanted my daughter, who was only 4 years old at the time, to live with her. She told the police that she believed I was a child molester." Following the discovery of Sonia's body, a close friend named Carolyn McBride informed the police that Michael Stone was unfit to care for his daughter, and that Sonia and Michael were separated, according to a police report from the Monterey County Sheriff's Department. The family physician, Dr. Milton Estes, examined and interviewed Stone's daughter in May 1980, when Sonia's mother had shared her suspicions with him. Dr. Estes concluded that there was no evidence of any abuse or any other wrongful behavior by Stone, as documented in the police report. Nevertheless, based on accusations made by several individuals mentioned in the police report, Stone's daughter spent 8 days under the care of Child Protective Services. "Those were the 8 most agonizing days of my life," Stone expressed. Eventually, Stone regained custody of his daughter. However, she later went to live with a relative in British Columbia, Canada.
15-year-old Melissa Lee was murdered in April 1993, and a Bothell man was finally arrested yesterday. That's him.
It was a fateful night on April 13, 1993, when darkness cloaked Melissa Lee's quiet home in Bothell, Washington. At just 15 years old, she found herself alone, eagerly anticipating a friend's arrival for a night of companionship. The clock ticked past 9:30 p.m. when she last spoke to her mother, a routine check-in call to assure her well-being. Little did they know that this would be the final trace of Melissa within those familiar walls. At midnight, Sharon Lee, Melissa's mother, arrived home with her fiancé, expecting to find her daughter safe. Instead, they were greeted by an eerie silence and an open front door. Inside, the living room was in disarray, and a strange odor of chemicals filled the air. Trusting her instincts, Sharon immediately contacted the authorities, filing a missing persons report. What could have happened to Melissa Lee on that fateful night? And what events unfolded during the hours of darkness that led to her disappearance? Bothell, Washington, the setting of Melissa Lee's mysterious disappearance, is a charming city situated in King and Snohomish counties. With a population around 46,000 residents, Bothell offers a blend of suburban tranquility and convenient access to urban amenities. Nestled between Seattle and Everett, it enjoys a prime location in the picturesque Pacific Northwest. Known for its well-regarded schools, family-friendly neighborhoods, and scenic parks, Bothell is often considered an ideal place to live. The community embraces a close-knit atmosphere, fostering a sense of belonging and camaraderie. While no place is entirely immune to crime, Bothell maintains a relatively low crime rate compared to larger urban centers, allowing residents to enjoy a peaceful and secure environment. Melissa Ann Lee, born on February 2, 1978, had a life brimming with dreams and possibilities. In 1993, when Melissa was just 15 years old, she had a captivating charm that fascinated people around her. Her mother, Sharon Lee, spoke fondly of her daughter, describing Melissa as sweet, gorgeous, and endlessly friendly. She radiated happiness wherever she went, her vibrant spirit leaving an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. She had 2 siblings, a brother named Eric, age 19, and a sister named Kelly, age 13. Melissa was more than just a pretty face. She harbored ambitions of becoming a model, yearning to grace the runways and magazine covers with her unique charm. Melissa found solace in spending time with the elderly, lending a helping hand and bringing smiles to their faces. Melissa's innate ability to connect with others forged lasting friendships, and her beauty and charisma inspired admiration. Tragically, an ominous night shattered the hopes of those who cherished her. The events of this gripping tale unfolded in Washington state on the evening of April 13, 1993. On that particular night, Melissa Lee found herself at home, alone, while her mother, Sharon Lee, worked her shift as a bartender at a local establishment. Melissa had been eagerly anticipating the arrival of a friend who was scheduled to spend the night with her, but for reasons unknown, the friend never showed up. As the night wore on, Melissa's siblings were absent from home as well, leaving her in solitude. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Melissa reached out to her mother, placing a check-in call to ensure everything was fine. The conversation served as a reassuring touchpoint, confirming Melissa's presence at home during that time. However, the atmosphere would soon take a drastic turn. Shortly after midnight, Sharon Lee returned home accompanied by her fiancé, only to discover that Melissa was nowhere to be found. Sharon's heart was filled with concern as she looked over the scene in front of her. The front door stood ajar, a clear sign of intrusion, and the living room was in disarray. The once neatly arranged coffee table had been pushed out of place, while an ashtray and a jar of peanuts lay scattered on the floor. A spilled glass of milk added to the sense of chaos. Further adding to the mystery were unexpected items left behind. In the scene there were unfamiliar cigarettes labeled as Marlboro, and a lighter that clearly didn't belong to Melissa. Moreover, an unsettling scent of chemicals lingered in the air, heightening Sharon's unease. Whether it was a result of her instinct or the glaring evidence of disorder, Sharon knew deep down that something was gravely amiss. She refused to passively wait for Melissa's return, and immediately took action, filing a missing persons report without delay. Tragically, the hopes of a safe reunion were shattered as the day progressed. On April 14, 1993, around 3 p.m., authorities made a grim discovery: the lifeless body of Melissa Lee. Her remains were found in a dense, brushy ravine beneath the Edgewater Creek Bridge, located on Muckletale Boulevard at the far western edge of Everett city limits. The scene was a harrowing contrast to the vibrant young girl who had captivated the hearts of those who knew her. Melissa's clothing bore troubled signs of what had happened to her. She was found wearing a black San Jose Sharks sweatshirt, orange and pink shorts, and dark-colored socks. Her clothes were in disarray, reflecting a struggle, and she was barefoot. Adding to the disturbing nature of the discovery, Melissa's underwear was found to be on backward. Sharon Lee, Melissa's mother, shared with authorities that these were not the clothes Melissa would typically wear outside the house. They were the casual garments she would wear for comfort while lounging around at home. Reports indicated that Melissa was abducted during a critical time frame between 9:30 p.m. and midnight on April 13, 1993, from her residence in Bothell, specifically in the 19800 block of Filbert Road. Investigators revealed that Melissa had been strangled, her life cruelly taken away before her body was discarded, tumbling over 100 feet below the bridge. After Melissa's tragic murder, investigators pursued justice relentlessly, leaving no avenue unexplored. Despite their relentless efforts, the case presented significant challenges, and the identity of a person of interest remained elusive. During the investigation, attention turned to a curious stain found on one of Melissa's garments, which became a crucial piece of evidence in the case. Additionally, toxicology reports revealed that Melissa had no traces of alcohol or drugs in her system. However, they did indicate the presence of ethyl ether, a colorless compound historically used as an anesthetic and a potent intoxicant, as well as traces of heptane, a primary component of gasoline that emits a distinct odor. The revelation left friends and family in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the grim reality of Melissa's fate. Authorities delved into Melissa's personal life, searching for clues that could shed light on the motive behind her tragic demise. Melissa, known as a good-natured girl with no previous encounters with law enforcement, had connections with individuals of a suspicious nature. These acquaintances had affiliations with gangs, prompting initial scrutiny from investigators. However, as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that none of these gang members seemed to have any direct involvement in Melissa's murder. Despite the authorities' periodic revisits throughout the years, the case eventually went cold due to the lack of potential leads and the absence of direct involvement from any of the investigated gang members. Sharon Lee, Melissa's mother, shared that she never perceived these gang members as potential suspects. From her perspective, they had always appeared to genuinely care about Melissa, and their presence at her funeral further reinforced their connection to her. The complex web of relationships and potential motives deepened the mystery, fueling the determination of law enforcement to unravel the truth behind Melissa Ann Lee's untimely demise. As investigators meticulously combed through Melissa's belongings, their attention turned to the journal found in her room. It was within the pages of her journal that a breakthrough awaited, carrying profound significance for the case. Lee's journal also captured the emotional turmoil of a recent breakup. Her final handwritten entry, dated April 12, 1993, expressed her heartfelt desire for a reconciliation. As she wrote, "I hope to God we get back together." Dated March 14, 1993, Melissa's entry revealed her initial encounter with Alan, whom she had met over the phone on Nightline. The subsequent entry detailed another outing with him. Alan picked me and someone else up at 4:15 p.m., and we went out to eat, then to Fantasia, then went home. Nightline, also spelled as Niteline, was essentially the equivalent of Tinder during the 1990s. It was commonly referred to as a party line or a date line. Nightline provided a platform for individuals to connect with strangers in their local area over the phone. While it may sound risky, similar to Tinder, It carried the inherent uncertainty of not truly knowing the person you were conversing with, as there were no photos involved. However, during that time, it was a popular pastime for people in the area, allowing them to potentially meet new individuals. Alan Dean, the man Melissa encountered, was 35 years old. These revelatory journal entries propelled Alan Edward Dean into the spotlight as one of the early suspects in the case. The cryptic details and the connection between Melissa and Alan became pivotal in the investigation, serving as a crucial starting point for authorities to delve deeper into his background and potential involvement in the tragic events that unfolded on that fateful night. Investigators conducted interviews with several men who were speculated to have potential involvement in the case back in 1993. In an effort to gather more information, polygraph tests were administered to 4 individuals. However, as Brad Welvatne, the then lead detective on the case for the sheriff's office, noted, the rumors surrounding these men seemed to be unfounded and lacked substantial evidence. Beginning on May 18, 1993, investigators initiated a process of calling the phone numbers listed in Lee's address book. Among the contacts was a man identified as Dean, who was listed under an alternate name alongside the mention of Nightline. Detective Greg Rinta of Snohomish County arranged a meeting with Dean at an apartment located on Madison Street in Everett, approximately 3.5 miles away from the discovery site of the body. Dean recalled his acquaintance with Lee, revealing that they had connected through a talk line. When contacting the number, Dean had assumed the alias Mike. Although they had gone on a few dates, Dean clarified that their interactions had not escalated into an intimate nature. Dean, who worked as a Boeing mechanic at the Everett plant, specifically in the interior shop as an assembler of decorative panels alongside Airport Road, informed the detectives that he had been on disability for a few months due to a back injury. The detective made a note that Dean underwent back surgery on May 8, 1993, and had staples inserted. It was also observed that Dean would have had access to various chemicals in his line of work. When questioned, Dean acknowledged using a different name when initially chatting with new acquaintances, and although it cannot be confirmed, it is likely that he had also misrepresented his age. Given that Dean appeared youthful and could pass for someone in their early 20s, it is plausible that he presented himself as younger while he was actually 35. At the outset, Dean's statements raised suspicions among authorities. Firstly, he claimed to have no knowledge of Melissa's demise, which seemed improbable considering their connection. The fact that Melissa was murdered and disposed of just 3 miles from Dean's residence raised further doubts. Additionally, given his occupation as a mechanic, Dean had access to a range of chemicals, while Melissa's system showed traces of heptane, a component found in gasoline. Over time, Melissa's mother, Sharon Lee, made the difficult decision to rebuild her life while still grieving and seeking justice for her daughter's murder. Alongside her mourning, she had to consider the well-being of her 2 other children, Eric, age 19, and Kelly, age 13. Sharon had concerns for their safety, fearing that the perpetrator responsible for Melissa's death might return and harm her other children. Consequently, she chose to relocate across the country to Tennessee, feeling that she could no longer bear the weight of the situation in Washington. However, in 1994, Sharon decided to return to the area, driven by her desire to contribute to her daughter's case in any possible way. Encouraged by her fiancé, Sharon planned to save money, and then return to the area to post advertisements, distribute flyers, and offer a reward. The reward was initially set at $10,000 for anyone who could provide substantial information, leading to an arrest within 3 weeks. Unfortunately, as time passed, money began to run low, and Sharon found herself emotionally and mentally drained. The uncertainty surrounding her daughter's fate took a toll on her well-being, causing immense distress. She expressed that not knowing the identity of her daughter's killer was driving her to the brink of insanity. Despite the reward being publicized, flyers circulated, and word spreading about the murder, no significant leads emerged. In 1994, Sharon shared with the Daily Herald, "I can't go on with my life with this hanging over me. It's like it's there every single day, every single night. I want somebody to be caught, not only so Melissa can be at rest, but so I can be at rest." Throughout the years, dedicated individuals worked tirelessly to ensure that Melissa's case did not fade into oblivion. Her face even appeared on the King of Diamonds playing card, which was distributed to prisoners in the area. The hope was that prisoners might recognize the individuals or descriptions and come forward with any relevant information. This practice of distributing playing cards featuring unsolved crimes dates back to the 1970s and has led to the resolution of numerous cases. However, it became apparent that this approach would not be the breakthrough needed to solve Melissa's case. What ultimately led to the resolution of Melissa's case was the discovery of DNA evidence. As advancements in DNA testing became available, investigators conducted multiple attempts to match the DNA found on Melissa's underwear. Despite several efforts, they were unable to find a solid match in their existing databases. However, with the assistance of a renowned genealogist named C.C. Moore, a comprehensive DNA profile of the unidentified man was created. C.C. Moore has made significant contributions to solving cold cases over the years, and even gained recognition through her television series, The Genetic Detective, aired on ABC. Utilizing her expertise, the unknown man's DNA was uploaded to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database, in late 2018. From there, C.C. Moore meticulously constructed an extensive family tree based on the DNA, searching for the point where two branches intersected, the man's parents. During this process, two highly promising matches, as well as three potentially promising matches, emerged from the investigation. Additionally, numerous more distant matches were identified. One name on the list stood out to the authorities: Alan Dean. In July 2019, their focus turned towards obtaining DNA samples from Alan Dean to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene. In July 2019, a team of 3 undercover police officers approached Alan Dean's residence with a clever plan. Disguised as ordinary individuals, they presented themselves as gum testers, seeking his feedback on new chewing gum flavors. The intention was to collect his saliva during the chewing process and acquire a sample of his DNA. However, Dean quickly grew suspicious when the woman explicitly mentioned collecting his DNA. Dean's response, as documented in Walventay's report, was to inquire, "You're not here to collect my DNA, right?" This unexpected turn of events foiled their initial strategy, and the officers realized they needed an alternative approach to obtain his DNA sample. In April 2020, a considerable amount of time later, the decision was made to initiate surveillance on Mr. Dean. However, to their frustration, he rarely left his house, making it challenging to gather any significant information. Despite this setback, there was a breakthrough when he eventually emerged from his residence to smoke a cigarette. Seizing the opportunity, law enforcement swiftly retrieved the discarded cigarette and sent it to the lab for testing. Comparing the DNA extracted from the cigarette to the DNA on file, they achieved a remarkable outcome. It was a perfect match. The results confirmed their suspicions, identifying him as the perpetrator. Remarkably, he had been on their radar since the early stages of the murder investigation. 62-year-old Alan Dean was apprehended on June 2, 2023 in Bothell around 5 p.m. Interestingly, 8 years prior to Melissa Lee's murder, Dean faced allegations of assaulting a young girl in Scottsdale, Arizona. According to the available police report, the identity of the girl remains undisclosed for privacy reasons. She recounted how Dean provided her with alcohol and marijuana, which she consumed. However, she began feeling peculiarly intoxicated, suspecting that the marijuana may have been laced with another substance. In her impaired state, Dean instructed her to remove her clothing, which she complied with before eventually falling asleep. The duration of her slumber was unclear to her upon awakening. It is worth noting the significant age gap between them, with Dean being approximately 27 years old at the time of the incident. During questioning, Dean acknowledged providing the girl with beer and marijuana. But like the situation involving Melissa, he maintained that it never progressed into any intimate activities. He was arrested without any charges filed against him, but later released, leading him to relocate to a different state. It is important to note that Dean has a history of multiple arrests, including offenses such as marijuana possession, domestic violence, resisting arrest, disobeying law enforcement, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Despite his checkered past, since he never faced felony charges, his DNA was never entered into the law enforcement database. It is highly probable that he was incarcerated at Snohomish County Jail with a staggering bail amount of $2 million set for his release. During his court appearance in the jail, he made it abundantly clear to everyone present that he strongly opposed being there. However, his speech was incoherent and filled with nonsensical statements. He declined to comply with the court proceedings, using confusing legal jargon that perplexed those in the courtroom. His behavior and speech were met with frustration, and many people in the courtroom simply wished he would stop talking. Sharon Lee took a flight to Washington for a press conference, where she stood alongside her daughter's photos in the courtroom. During the event, she delivered a concise yet impactful statement, expressing her satisfaction with witnessing this long-awaited development. She conveyed her willingness to accept any outcome, stating, "Whatever you do, it's totally fine." She expressed her hope for justice to be served, adding, "I hope he brought some hell." Detective Walvatne, who was involved in the case, acknowledged the crucial role of technological advancements in bringing about its resolution. He also had a message for criminals who have evaded capture, emphasizing that law enforcement works diligently with factual evidence to ensure accountability, and they are relentless in their pursuit of justice. Sarah, Melissa's friend mentioned earlier in this video, believed in miracles and maintained her faith that Melissa's case would eventually be solved. Her belief has proven to be accurate at this moment. On January 3, 1979, a young man hunting for ducks headed to the mouth of the Snohomish River when he stumbled upon something strange. It looked like something had been entangled in a fishing line, and when he got closer to the strange object, he was horrified to see that it was human bones. He immediately contacted the police, and as soon as they arrived, it would begin an investigation that would continue for over 4 decades. However, the biggest questions that needed answers were, who was this person? And what could have led to their death? Nestled in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, Snohomish County, Washington, is an idyllic place, famed for its quaint towns and rich cultural heritage. Living here is a serene retreat, sprinkled with historic landmarks that narrate stories of the past, and recreational areas for those with an adventurous spirit. The people are as friendly as your grandmother's homemade apple pie. always ready with a welcoming smile. It's a close-knit community where everyone's name is as familiar as their own. With a remarkably low crime rate, it's the kind of place where you could leave your doors unlocked without worry. Yet, amidst this tranquil setting, the inexplicable remains discovered in January 1979 sent ripples through the calm of Snohomish County. On the third day of January 1979, as the calendar flipped into the new year, a blanket of wintry chill still covered the county. On the western side of North Spencer Island, a local gentleman whose daily agenda mostly revolved around duck hunting decided to embark on his favorite pastime. As he neared the mouth of the Snohomish River, he noticed an anomaly disrupting the usual picturesque vista. Among the reeds and rocks, he discovered something that had no business being there: human bones. The shocking sight was real, pale human bones, whispering tales of a life abruptly ended. One moment, he was out seeking ducks. The next, he landed smack dab in the middle of a mystery. Of course, the first course of action was to invite the boys in blue, who arrived with more speed than a duck takes flight. The police descended on the scene near Everett, Washington, due to the troubling discovery. The duck hunter had found something that made it clear this was not a simple case, but a human tragedy. The grim discovery not only caught everyone off guard, but also sent ripples of shock and curiosity through the county. And now, the investigation was about to commence. The scene near Everett, Washington, where the bones were discovered, was far from the cozy warmth of a morning cup of joe. As the police arrived, even they couldn't deny the shivers that had less to do with the cold and more to do with the sobering reality of their surroundings. The duck hunter, still shocked by what he had seen, showed the police the remains. There, caught in the fishing line like an eerie still life, was a quarterback shoe and a piece of human leg bone. Guided by the duck hunter, the police shifted slightly to the west. Here the landscape unfolded a red, orange, white, and gray checkered shirt, disturbingly close to a human skull, ribs, and a shoe that eerily still contained a foot. As detectives returned to the eerie scene for another sweep, their quest bore strange fruits. They found a leather wallet, remarkably preserved against the salty water, but conspicuously empty. No money, no driver's license, no fishing ticket. Nothing that could help identify this person. Nearby, they discovered a size 33 to 43 belt, lingering like a forgotten relic. The eerie treasure hunt continued with a pair of shoes boasting laces and peculiar numerals, 30 and 38. The name O'Sullivan was etched on the rubber heels, one of the few clues available to them. A pair of green pants and a tag bearing the proud declaration that it was iron-free and proudly made in the USA was also found. An insignificant detail for many, but for investigators, it was like a beacon in the fog. They hoped they could trace where these were made and sold, and this would lead them to their victim. But despite the eerie clues, the mystery only deepened. The remains offered little insight into what befell the unfortunate man. With decomposition advanced, even the simplest answers seemed elusive. The fragmented remains were entrusted to a medical examiner for an autopsy. After careful examination, the doctor determined the remains belonged to a man who had been dead for several months. Not the most enlightening of findings, but it was all that was possible due to the deteriorated state of the body. Despite their best efforts, the authorities struggled to attach a name to the mysterious remains. Robert Phillips, the coroner of Snohomish County at the time, gave him a temporary ID as John Doe 791, recording the cause of death as indeterminate due to lack of clues. As the days turned into weeks and then months, the unknown man was laid to rest at Everett Cypress Memorial Park on March 15, 1979, awaiting a day he could be claimed by a kin or finally identified. The harsh reality soon set in. With leads drying up faster than water in a desert, the agents finally had to acknowledge the bitter pill. The case had gone cold. Yet, as the old saying goes, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. And she was just clearing her throat. The investigation of the John Doe remains was far from over. For almost 3 decades, the case lay dormant. It was advanced science and modern law enforcement tools that became the unexpected heroes of our saga. Outdated research methods were replaced, and this gave the police hope that John Doe 791 could finally be identified. In 2008, Detective Jim Scharf and former Judge Ken Cossert became the dynamic duo who decided to reopen a number of cold cases from over the years. And lo and behold, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, the John Doe case from 1979 resurfaced. The mystery of the unknown man lingered like an unwelcome guest. Many tips had vanished without a trace, leaving a harsh reminder of lost critical evidence. Nevertheless, the determined officers persisted, digging through old records and photographs in their pursuit of the truth. Even as the world moved on, our intrepid investigators were still wrestling with the mystery. An army of John and Jane Does had cropped up in the interim, adding to the confusion. To keep things straight, they rechristened their John Doe from 1979 as Spencer Island John Doe. Fast forward to 2015. The cops got the green light to exhume Spencer Island John Doe's body. Forensic odontologist Dr. Kyle Tanaka was optimistic that a deep dive into the dental records might illuminate some lost leads. But alas, the path remained dark. Still, they soldiered on, uploading the case details to the National Database of Missing Persons. And they continued their quest for a tantalizing drop of truth. They scoured through the evidence, from the long-forgotten clothing items to the personal effects of the deceased, but nothing turned up. Then, in late 2015, as fate would have it, an unexpected tip popped in like a flash of lightning on a clear sunny day. A certain Spencer Island John Doe bore a striking resemblance to a long-lost farmhand from Marysville, according to the tip. And so the cops, always game for a bit of mystery, went on the chase. The absent farmhand from Marysville was not just an ordinary individual. He held the status of a notable local, known for running a fruit stand while exhibiting a love for hitting the sauce. His infamous limp made him a hard character to forget. He'd been AWOL since the 1970s, and the tip seemed to be legitimate. In a twist that could make seasoned crime novelists green with envy, the story gets murkier. After a month-long investigation, our detectives found a tombstone in Yuma, Arizona, using the resource of billiongraves.com. It appears that the farmhand in question had been interred in the southwestern desert since 1981. The discovery, contrary to their initial expectations, led the detectives to question the viability of their ongoing investigation. But no, that's not where our tale ends. Far from it. Dr. Kathy Taylor, from the King County Medical Examiner's Office, pieced together clues from the remains that were exhumed. According to her, our John Doe was somewhere between 27 and 61 years old, and stood somewhere between 5'1" and 5'7". She also found that he was possibly of Native American or Caucasian descent, or even a blend of both. More intriguing pieces fell into place, and it became evident that the mystery man led a life full of paradoxes. His broken femur showed no signs of medical attention. But strangely enough, he had access to dental care, as the gaping holes in his jawbone showed signs of healing, and some of his teeth sported metal fillings. After hitting several dead ends, and weaving a complex web of theories, our detectives decided to turn to the art of forensic sketches. An artist named Natalie Murray stepped up to the plate. Seeing her illustration, Dr. Kathy Taylor agreed that the sketch indeed appeared to represent someone half Native American and half Caucasian. Although not yet giving a final solution to the case, the sketch further helped in the finding of who Spencer Island John Doe could actually be. Fast forward to 2021, and a private Texas company called Othram Labs received a slice of John Doe's femur. This project, funded by an advocacy group called DNAsolves.com, used cutting-edge technology and years of experience to extract DNA, giving detectives another lead to follow. Following tireless efforts, a trail of DNA breadcrumbs led our detectives to a woman whose DNA matched the victim's. When they went to meet her, she revealed that she had a half-brother who had been missing for decades. After 44 years of anguish, the long-lost brother's identity was finally revealed in March of 2023 by Othram. Spencer Island John Doe was none other than Gary Lee Haynie. On September 23, 1950, somewhere between Kansas, a bustling Topeka hospital witnessed a grand event. Bernice Helen Schaefer, a 28-year-old woman, and Joseph Dominique Condamiti, a 37-year-old man, welcomed a sprightly young boy into the world. He was christened Gary Lee Haynie, a name that would soon dance on the lips of many. However, life in Topeka wasn't all that wonderful. Before baby Gary could even speak, his parents decided to part ways. The boy's destiny was jostled, but it was about to take a turn. Around 1955, Bernice donned the bridal white again, marrying a strapping soldier named Sheldon Lee Haynie. Sheldon didn't just marry Bernice, but he adopted her young son, rebranding him Gary Lee Haynie. Soon after, the family moved to New York, where Gary spent his formative years. Unfortunately for Gary, he lost his biological father at the age of 16, and his mother also followed suit when he was age 19. This resulted in Gary living with Sheldon ever since then. Sheldon's side of the family had its own share of quirky characters. There was Hal, Gary's step-cousin. He once said that Gary had something peculiar about his brain that made people turn their heads. He seemed to have an uncanny knack for capturing attention. Sheldon soon left the Army and began working for the Air Force, and relocated his family from the bustling streets of New York to the golden wheat fields of Kansas. As a result, Gary missed more than his share of holiday dinners because the journey was just too far. As he grew, he saw his family less and less, hardly ever showing up in family photos. Police believed that Gary might have resided with Sheldon in Everett, given Sheldon's presence there from the 1970s until 1990. Hal, on the other hand, revealed that the pair never really had a heart-to-heart about Gary. Gary, it seemed, was a tantalizing mystery, wrapped in a riddle, causing more head-scratching than a rogue case of chickenpox. Sadly, Sheldon's own life journey ended in 1997 in Oregon, sparking more questions. The discovery that he had hid Gary's absence led to even more unanswered questions. Interestingly, 3 years prior to the discovery of Gary's remains on Spencer Island, he was recorded deceased. The autopsy reported he'd been lifeless for months. Yet the riddle of his phantom 3-year stretch remained unsolved. The theories about his death ranged from rock accidents to surprise health issues, but nothing could ever be confirmed. Detectives suspect Gary shared a roof with his stepfather Sheldon in Everett. Known as a snowbird for his migratory lifestyle, including winters in Baja California. In the mid-'80s, Sheldon visited Texas, but never mentioned Gary. Later, he shifted to Oregon, and his silence about Gary's disappearance before his own death in 1997 deepened the intrigue. As Gary's life story concluded, the family's mixed reaction surfaced. Mourning a second time, they were armed now with closure. Detectives, meanwhile, breathed a sigh of relief, having finally untangled the Haynie mystery. The Gary Lee Haynie case, a tale twisted with time, now reaches its end. Destiny Renee Pittman, a young woman who was just 21, was shot and killed in her own home during a harrowing home invasion in James Drive, Kokomo, Indiana, on February 7, 2013, at around 9:30 p.m. The case inexplicably went cold with no suspects to instill any impetus, but a recent turn of events has brought the matter back into the public eye. This is a hair-raising story about a life cut short, an unsolved case that persisted for 10 years, and a long-awaited breakthrough. What could have led to Destiny's death? Was this a random act of violence, or was the home invasion planned? Kokomo is considered a good place to live, usually quiet, with crime rates being 9% lower than the national average. The city is also cherished for its recreational spots and historic charm. Nestled in the center of Kokomo lies James Drive. This close-knit neighborhood is renowned for its friendly faces and shared laughter. Unfortunately, this was not the case on the fateful night of February 7th, 2013, when the sinister murder of Destiny and the frightening house invasion destroyed the calm that once characterized this close community. Destiny Renee Pittman was born on January 9, 1992, to her loving parents Carla McCombs and Melvin Douglas Jr. She had a joyful spirit that made everyone around her happy. She had hopes of pursuing a modeling career and building a promising future for herself. Her loved ones described her as gorgeous, kind, and full of life. After graduating from high school, 21-year-old Destiny Pittman was on the verge of a bright future. She was excited to go out on a quest to mold her own life and pursue a modeling career. Destiny was determined to settle down and pay off the property she had recently bought, representing her independence and goals. She loved living in her house with her boyfriend, roommate, and her roommate's 2 kids. She also had 2 pit bulls and a chihuahua, which, according to her mother, were more than just household pets. Unfortunately, Destiny and her loved ones had no idea that such a monstrosity would cross their paths and change the trajectory of their lives forever. The circumstances leading up to the tragic incident appeared routine. Destiny was at home with her boyfriend, her roommate, and the 2 children on the evening of February 7, 2013, when 2 strangers approached their house. They started banging on the door heavily around 9:25 p.m. Pittman opened, and soon after, loud shots and a huge boom was heard. Chaos broke out at that very moment, and a gunshot resounded throughout the residence. A bullet to the chest claimed Destiny's life, extinguishing the vibrant spirit that brought light to the lives of those who knew her. The gunshot was heard across the neighborhood, alarming and terrifying the locals. To get help, Destiny's roommate desperately called the authorities while hiding out with her 2 kids. The close-knit community was completely shocked when it became apparent that Destiny's life had been snatched in such a senseless act of violence. Police officers arrived at the crime scene on James Drive around 9:40, shortly after receiving the distress call. They found Destiny lying in the hallway with a gunshot wound to her chest. The bullet had gone through her and penetrated the wall of the hallway. Devastated by the loss of such a lively and loving young woman, her boyfriend and roommate began to describe the chain of events that took place during the incident. They also mentioned that they hid with the kids when Pittman confronted the intruders. Upon reaching the crime scene, investigators saw a bullet wound to the victim's chest and recovered a .40 caliber shell casing. Their initial presumptions were that it was a house invasion. According to the witnesses, 2 armed suspects forced their way inside the house looking for cash before Pittman engaged them, which led the police to initially believe that it was a random incident. The roommate also told the police that the intruders were African American based on their tone and dialect. The police further questioned Destiny's boyfriend in their investigation, and he ultimately confessed to a shocking revelation. He and Destiny had both been involved in the marijuana trade, though Destiny parted ways from the business after inheriting a handsome sum. Just a few days before the intruders broke into their home, he claimed to have transferred a bag of marijuana and more than $2,000 to another location. The investigators now put together a theory, according to which the intruders may have targeted the pair searching for the drugs and cash they were carrying. As they looked into any links or anyone who might have been aware of Destiny and her boyfriend's illegal activities, this became the main focus of their inquiry. Despite their best efforts, the Kokomo Police Department couldn't find much solid evidence connecting any suspects to the crime. The first robbery motive, which involved drugs and money, gave the investigation some direction, but ran into trouble without strong leads or supporting information. The absence of witnesses or forensic evidence made it more difficult for detectives to find the offenders, giving them few options. The captain of the Kokomo Police Department, Teresa Galloway, also raised concerns, stating that people have been less than truthful in the case. Several people who know what happened are withholding information from the police. We're still moving forward and will continue to go until this is solved. After 2 years had passed, the only thing that could be made public was that Destiny's roommate and her boyfriend were fully collaborating with the authorities and giving them the information they needed. Eventually, though, the case went cold. As time passed, hopes for a breakthrough also diminished, leaving the police feeling increasingly frustrated, and Destiny Pittman's family and friends still struggling to come to terms with the tragedy and the unresolved questions that had haunted them. Carla Pittman McCombs, the mother of Destiny, clung to hope and yearned for her daughter to receive justice. But as time passed, the little hope started to disappear. "Nothing seems right," she lamented. The Pittman family, friends, and loved ones received support from the neighborhood as they grieved and yearned for closure. A close friend of Destiny's named Kelsey Crow shared the emotions of many by wishing that the guilt would devour the offender, and that they would eventually find the strength to come forward. But as the days progressed into weeks and months, hope almost got completely negated. Destiny's father, Junior Douglas, faced his own struggles, grappling with the frustration of the case's lack of progress. Despite the daily challenges and diminishing confidence, Douglas clung to a glimmer of hope, appealing to the responsible individuals to come forward, acknowledging that they would not want their own children to experience such a tragic fate. By late 2022, the unsolved murder case of Destiny Pittman had plagued her family, friends, and the Kokomo town for almost 10 years. As the years passed, optimism started to wane, and the once hot leads became cold. However, behind the scenes, detectives worked tirelessly to revive the case to bring Destiny justice. A ray of hope finally materialized in December 2022, when an improbable phone call arrived. Someone who had been following the press releases for years felt obligated to speak up. They thought the motive for the house invasion that claimed Destiny's life was a drug deal. This information gave the investigation new life, and gave it a critical lead that had been absent for a while. Two brothers, Joey McCartney and Jesse McCartney, aged 32 and 36 respectively, were identified as the suspects. According to the court records, this person stated that Jesse had asked them to go on an errand, which turned out to be the invasion. The individual took them in his white Jeep Cherokee, and they both headed to Pittman's house. The individual told the person to stay in the car while he put on some black leather gloves and got out a handgun. At Pittman's front door, Joey joined his brother, and the two went inside the house together. While still in the car, the person heard a huge boom, shortly after which both brothers rushed out of the house. After getting back into the car, both the individuals got excited at the sizable sum of cash they had gotten. The caller's identity was also kept hidden for years, ultimately suggesting that the person was a woman with some history with the suspects. The disclosure by her was due to the agony and remorse that the case had brought her. The source also disclosed that Jesse had sold the getaway car and the weapons used in the crime soon after the crime occurred. The Kokomo Police Department finally acquired arrest warrants for Joey and Jesse McCartney, using the accumulating proof and witness testimony. Wheels of justice started turning for Destiny Pittman, and the formerly hopeless case gained new momentum. Both brothers were charged with murder, burglary resulting in bodily injury, and conspiracy to conduct burglary. They were also each charged with burglary. These charges were listed in online court documents. According to court documents, Jesse was additionally charged with robbery causing bodily harm, a Class A felony, and possessing cocaine and marijuana. The long-awaited day of judgment for Destiny Pittman's killers arrived soon after the woman's revelation. On the 1st of March 2023, Joey McCartney was quickly taken into custody by police in his Graham, Kentucky home, while Jesse McCartney was apprehended at his Kokomo home just 2 hours later. Now that they were in custody, the McCartney brothers had to take responsibility for their horrible actions. After years of suffering and dread, Destiny's family at last found comfort in the knowledge that justice was just around the corner. The Pittman family received support as they made their way through the legal system from the Kokomo community, which had previously been troubled by the unsolved murder. Everyone was now looking up to the trial and further proceedings. The trial and court proceedings surrounding the murder of Destiny Pittman were the next crucial step towards justice. Both Jesse and Joey McCartney had their initial hearings as the court case progressed. On March 9, 2023, Jesse McCartney appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. The judge then ordered that he be kept without bond. On March 10th, Joey McCartney appeared in court for the first time, and the judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. He was also ordered to be jailed without bond. The prosecution will have plenty of time to prove their case against them because the trial is scheduled to begin in August of 2023. The arrest of Joey and Jesse McCartney brought a bittersweet sense of peace to Destiny Pittman's grieving family. After enduring years of anguish and unanswered questions, the news of the arrest evoked a complex array of emotions. While nothing could bring back their loved one, the arrest provided a semblance of justice, offering a glimmer of relief, grief, and renewed hope. This bafflingly strange case involves the murder of 19-year-old Christina Castoligina, who disappeared on a snowy night on March 19, 1983, in Livingston County, Michigan. 10 days after her disappearance, her lifeless body was found in a remote wooded location close to her house. The case went cold for 4 decades, after which a significant development was made possible by advances in DNA technology. Unanswered questions tormented her loved ones as a result of the 40-year-long unsolved crime. Who could have committed such a heinous act of violence? Why did justice appear to elude this broken family for such an extended period of time? Overall, Livingston County is a beautiful place to be. According to the 2022 census, this county has a land area of 585 square miles and a population of about 196,000. It is a thriving community with a mix of urban and rural areas. It is highly praised for its natural beauty and for providing a wide range of outdoor activities, such as hiking, camping, and fishing. This area also has a lower than normal violent crime rate. It is around 10.8 per 1,000 people, considerably lower than the national average. Tragically, the mishap occurred in this serene setting, creating a lingering mystery that would trouble the area for years. Christina Lynn Castoligina was born on March 8, 1964, to her parents Christopher and Beatrice Castoligina. Christina was raised in Redford, Michigan, with her older sister Anna, in a contented and joyful home. After graduating from Redford Union High School, Christina actively participated in sports, like basketball and volleyball, where she demonstrated her athletic prowess. She was also considered a reserved and introspective person who frequently preferred to work alone rather than interact with others in a social setting. However, Christina's sincere and generous character won the hearts of all around her, creating a lasting impression on both friends and strangers. The beginning of 1983 felt hopeful for Christina, then 19 years old. She was very much in love with her 25-year-old boyfriend Christopher Lindsay and had just started working at the Detroit Edison Company as a research clerk, a position she enjoyed. Christina was intrigued by the idea of embarking on a new trip after graduating from high school and considered enlisting in the Army and leaving her beloved home. She prepared to enroll in the Army and reached out to an Army recruiter, taking a brave step towards her desired future. She had no idea her hopes for a happy life and a world of opportunities would be tragically crushed, leaving her loved ones to deal with the unfathomable loss. It was an unusually chilly Saturday night on March 19, 1983. Christina took the day off to run errands and spend time with her boyfriend, Christopher Lindsay. They parted ways around noon and planned to meet later in the evening, However, their plans to meet for a date never materialized. Christina returned to her parents' home on MacArthur Road at around 2 p.m. and took a nap. According to her mother, Christina was excited to go out with her boyfriend that night. However, when she didn't hear from him by 7:30 p.m., she became restless and decided to look out for him. First off, she went to her boyfriend's house. When she arrived, his sister informed her that he was not there. She then went a mile down 5 Mile Road to a friend's home. Her partner wasn't at her friend's place either. Christina stayed and watched television with her friend for a while before leaving to return home. All the distances she covered were by foot, as she had sold her beloved red Mustang due to insurance costs just a week prior. Tragically, she never returned. When Christina's parents could not contact her the following day, their concerns grew, and on March 21, 1983, after exhausting all possible ways of contacting her, Christina's mother Beatrice reported her daughter missing to the Redford Police Department around noon. The Redford Police Department quickly began a thorough search after Christina's mother's report. Investigators questioned relatives, friends, and acquaintances in an effort to piece together the circumstances that led up to her disappearance. Her boyfriend told the police that he had seen Christina standing outside the Kingsborough Party Store on the 5 Mile Wayside in Redford Township at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of March 19, 1983. He made the decision not to stop and pick her up, even though he was in a car with his friends at the time, because he was aware that Christina disapproved of the friends he was with. Instead, Christopher got out of the car around a store a few meters further and waited, expecting to see Christina go by. He went looking for her after she didn't show up and claimed to have extensively searched for her himself. He called her house out of concern for her safety, but no one picked up. Christopher was concerned but opted against telling Christina's parents, since he didn't want to upset them. The police released pictures of the missing girl and conducted interviews with several other people in an effort to learn any additional information. Eventually, they got a tip from Penny Mares, a self-described psychic who said Christina's remains might be in the garbage in Inkster. The officers meticulously examined the nearby dumpster and trash cans, but nothing was to be found. While some people questioned the police's use of a psychic assistant, Detective John Crete supported it, highlighting their dedication to following every lead in their investigation. The mystery surrounding Christina's disappearance grew as the search went through Redford's outskirts and even beyond, leaving the police and the locals searching for solutions. After 10 excruciatingly long days of searching, a man reported finding human remains while deer hunting in the Oak Grove State Game Area in Deerfield Township, more than 45 miles away from her town. The Redford Police Department investigators arrived at the site right away. They discovered the half-dressed victim lying in a secluded forested area at the intersection of Fawcett and Fisher Roads. When they examined the body, it was identified as 19-year-old Christina Castoligina. Examining the scene, investigators noticed that the body had been placed in the wooded area before the snowfall, and as the snow began to melt, Christina's body got exposed. She was found close to a group of trees, partially hidden by several inches of snow. The body was sent for an autopsy. The results were quite shocking. Christina had been assaulted and strangled to death. Her body also contained unidentified male DNA, which gave optimism that future developments in DNA technology could help catch the murderer. The investigators were initially concentrating on Christina's boyfriend and his companions, but they were ultimately cleared of all suspicion when police could not find any evidence connecting them to the crime. Instead, The evidence pointed to the idea that Christina had been picked up by a random person who had committed the horrific act. Although violent crimes were uncommon in Livingston County, a peculiar pattern did appear. 10 bodies had been discovered in the county's state-owned deserted land between 1978 and 1983, sparking talk of a possible serial killer in this area. Additionally, the man who found Christina's body came under suspicion. He didn't show up for the scheduled lie detector exam and gave conflicting statements all along. However, no direct evidence connected him to the crime, and he had no criminal record. Hence, the man was not detained as a result. Despite these clues, the detectives' efforts to find the killer of Christina Castoligina started to wane, and they ran out of new directions to take. The terrifying idea that the culprit was still at large haunted Livingston County, pressing heavily on the locals. The case progressively dropped off the front pages as media interest diminished. The case eventually went cold. However, a ray of hope appeared in the year 2000 with the development of DNA technology. With the help of the information acquired at the crime site, detectives could eventually construct a male DNA profile. They entered the DNA profile into COMPILATION, the country's criminal justice database, in an effort to uncover a match that would help them identify the elusive murderer. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, the search turned up nothing, and the case once more became cold. Christina's parents didn't let their beloved daughter's memory fade, despite the setback. Instead, they clung to the belief that justice would eventually triumph. As the years passed, their determination only grew stronger, and they anxiously awaited some sort of closure in the case. The case remained shrouded in darkness for 2 long decades after this. However, another glimmer of hope appeared in the year 2022. The Livingston County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Squad, working with a group of seasoned detectives, embarked on the task of solving this mystery. The first thing they did was apply for funds so they could use the 1983 suspect DNA samples to perform sophisticated DNA testing. They were able to get the required cash with the aid of the Season of Justice, a laudable nonprofit devoted to sponsoring DNA testing on unsolved cold cases. Season of Justice provides funding to law enforcement agencies nationally for advanced testing, advancing the investigation of homicides, assaults, and other crimes in which the body of the victim or the culprit themselves is still unknown, and DNA testing is the only available investigative method. After receiving approval and financing, the DNA samples were transferred to Othram Incorporated, a reputable forensic lab in Texas, with a history of successfully solving several cold cases. A team of researchers in Othram used the forensic-grade genome sequencing technique to create a thorough genealogy profile from the DNA of the unidentified suspect. They discovered a strong suspect after searching family tree websites and genealogical databases for matches against the profile. 3 different familial DNA comparison testings validated the suspect. The long-awaited conclusion to the cold case came with identifying the unnamed male suspect as Charles David Shaw. The detectives methodically tracked the suspect's ancestry by finding single hits on DNA genealogy databases, eventually leading them to the suspect's living uncle. They then created a family tree by following the ties to Charles Shaw. Finally, the breakthrough occurred in 2023, as the truth came to light. The investigators' unrelenting efforts confirmed that Charles David Shaw was the culprit in the murder of Christina Castoligina. There is limited knowledge regarding the early life of Shaw. However, the information provided by his family and the Livingston County Sheriff's Office portrayed disturbing details about him. Charles Shaw was described as a sex addict who struggled with mental illness and gender identity. Shaw's relationship with the police had always been rocky. He was first detained by the Livonia Police Department in 1973 on charges of breaking and entering. Then in 1977 on suspicion of drug possession. In 1981, he was arrested for attempted abduction of a woman in the Fowlerville McDonald's parking lot. He received a 2-week jail term and a probationary period for this offense. He was also detained in 1982 for stealing women's shoes from a Kmart. Detectives couldn't find any connections between Christina and Shaw that would indicate a motive for her targeting. However, they found that Shaw had resided in Livonia for a while at the time the murder took place, and lived only 5 kilometers from the scene of Christina's disappearance. The probe revealed his difficult personal life, where issues with addiction and mental illness appeared to be connected to his illegal behavior. These revelations depicted Charles Shaw as a multifaceted and conflicted person who battled inner demons while performing horrible acts. It was revealed by the detectives that Shaw died an accidental death via asphyxiation only 8 months after Christina's murder, at the age of 26. Sadly, he could not be brought to justice due to this. Livingston County Sheriff Mike Murphy thanked the Shaw family for their assistance throughout the investigation in February 2023 at a press conference. The cooperation was crucial in identifying Charles Shaw as the person responsible for Christina Castoligina's death. Shaw's wife gave vital information to police before his death, saying that he intended to undergo a gender change and was looking for treatment for the transition. She also revealed that he was an outlaw, offering light on Shaw's complex past. After the case was concluded, Christina Castoligina's sister Anna, the only family member still alive, showed her relief. Anna actively participated in raising awareness of the issue, never giving up hope, and even spoke to the media about her sister in 2014. She said there wasn't a day that she didn't think about her. When the murderer was revealed, Anna could finally take solace in knowing Christina's killer had been found after 40 years of speculation. The use of forensic-grade genome sequencing and genetic genealogy was what brought the case to its conclusion. The Livingston County Sheriff's Office Detective Sergeant Matt Young mentioned his joy after they had solved a 40-year-old homicide. The authorities now hope that genetic DNA discoveries will enable other families of violent crime victims to find closure. The Livingston County Cold Case Unit is also fully committed to continuing its investigations into any remaining unsolved homicide cases. Here's what the Sheriff's Office had to say in a news release. We are hopeful that the surviving family members of Christina Castoligina, along with victims and families of other violent unsolved crimes who have been awaiting justice for decades, experience closure as genealogical DNA continues to help law enforcement advance efforts to achieve justice for victims. On October 16, 1970, 16-year-old Pamela Lynn Conyers went shopping in Anne Arundel, a mid-sized town in Maryland, to pick up some groceries at the Arundel Mall. The mall would be the last place she would ever step foot in, as she could never have expected what would happen to her next. Pamela never made it back home, sending her family and entire community into panic mode for days. 4 days later, her body would be found in a wooded area, with strangulation marks around her neck. Eventually, it would take detectives 5 decades to find out what really happened to her. What could have happened to her? Why did it take detectives over 50 years to solve her case? Anne Arundel County is one of the best places to live in Maryland. Anne Arundel is a mid-sized town that houses a little over 580,000 residents, and most of them have their own houses. The county is a calm place to live, the kind of place you'd settle to start a family with good schools and a low poverty average. There are recreational parks in the area, where residents occasionally visit for picnics or to rewind after a long day. Anne Arundel is known for being peaceful. But that peace was abruptly disrupted on the night of October 12, 1970. Pamela Lynn Conyers was born on January 13, 1954, in the Anne Arundel County of Maryland. She was the only child of Mr. and Mrs. Conyers, and just like most only children, she was dearly beloved. But apart from being loved by her family, her friends and other people around her also loved her company. Pamela was a delightful person to be around because she was full of life and hope, and was just like the average 16-year-old that approached everything without a care in the world. One of the things that intrigued people about Pamela was her smile and fashion sense. Pamela was popular and likable in school, with lots of friends. She attended Glen Burnie High School, a public school in Maryland, and was an above-average student. Pamela was also a great dancer, and even joined her school's dance club. Pamela Conyers hoped to become a professional dancer one day, and maybe run her own dancing school for young people. Growing up as an only child to two loving parents, Pamela tended to trust people, even the ones she didn't know. She easily made friends because she was empathetic and an open book, always sharing her ideas as they popped in her head, sometimes even oversharing. Pamela had an interest in sports and cheerleading. The 16-year-old attended lots of pep rallies, which was an opportunity for her to show off her dancing skills. Nobody knew that her bright smile would one day fade away permanently. Around the last 4 months of each year, schools planned pep rallies to elevate the sports spirit, giving students something to look forward to. It was time for the 1970 October pep rally at Glen Burnie High School, and Pamela Conyers was in high spirits. Before that day, she had been attending all of the school's rehearsals, especially the dance rehearsals in preparation for the pep rally. October 16th, the day of the pep rally, came, and Pamela attended the event. After having fun with her classmates and other students, she went back home. Later that evening, she decided to go shopping and borrowed her parents' 1967 Dodge Monaco and drove to the Herondale Mall in Glen Burnie, Maryland. But she never made it back home. When she didn't come back home that night, her parents immediately started panicking. They went to the mall, which was where she said she was going to, but she wasn't there. When they asked the people around if they had seen her, everyone had the same answer, that she had left the mall and nothing more. When they could no longer continue the search on their own as they kept meeting dead ends, her family contacted the police and reported the incident. Upon telling the police what had happened, they had to wait for some hours to confirm that she didn't return home. After waiting a few hours with no sign of her, the police knew that the case was serious. With Pamela not returning, the police started scouring the town. They interrogated her parents to know if she had any home troubles or psychological issues. But they told the police that she had a good relationship with them and didn't appear depressed. The police went straight to her last location a few hours after her parents made the report, which was the Herondale Mall, and learned that she had driven out of the mall. But there was no trace of her, nor the car anywhere close to the mall, which further sent her parents into fear. They wondered what could have happened to their daughter, because they were so sure that she hadn't run away from home. Pamela didn't have troubles with her family or friends. She wasn't a depressed teen, so there was nothing that could trigger her running. The search for Pamela continued for 3 days with no hope, until on the 19th of October 1970 they found her car parked in a wooded area outside of Millersville, 2 hours away from her town. But there was no sign of Pamela. With the car now in the hands of the search party, it seemed like Pamela Conyers was no longer out of their reach, and they were positive that she would be close by. All those hopes were soon crushed. 24 hours after the cops found the car on October 20th, they also found Pamela. But she was dead and abandoned in a wooded area outside of Millersville, Maryland. She was in an area between the eastbound and westbound lanes of Maryland Route 177 that stretched through Millersville. Pamela's death shocked the whole of Anne Arundel, as they had expected good news to come out of the search. When the cops found Pamela, there were strangulation marks around her neck, and upon further investigation, they found that she had been assaulted. There were no clues, no traces, no leads, nothing that could make the case easy to solve. Although the police were able to gather and store some evidence and foreign DNA, they couldn't do further testing because there was no sophisticated technology at the time of the murder capable of doing this. After recovering Pamela's body, they combed through the area in search of clues as to what may have happened. Around the same time Pamela went missing and died, 3 other women were also found dead in areas not too far from where they had found Pamela, and the police suspected that all the cases had a connection. The first woman's body that was found was that of Sister Kathy Cesnik, a Reverend sister and teacher at Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore. She was found dead in a garbage dump on November 7, 1969, almost a year before Pamela's death. Before Sister Kathy's death, some of the girls at the school where she taught confided in her that they were assaulted by their chaplain, Reverend Joseph Maskell. The police suspected that he killed Sister Kathy with a blow to the head using a blunt object. The other 2 women that also disappeared around the same time Pamela died were 20-year-old Joyce Malicki and 16-year-old Grace Montagne. Their bodies were found, but no traces of their killers. As the police made no headway with the investigation, it slowly became a cold case. Since there was no technology that could be used to support the investigation, it was added to a pile of other cold cases, and her body was buried. The detectives were left in a state of uncertainty, with no hope of solving the case. Although many people had forgotten about Pamela Lynn Conyers, her family and law enforcement officials never forgot her case. As technology advanced, the case was reinvestigated again in 2017. A year before Pamela Lynn Conyers died, Sister Kathy Cesnik was found dead in a garbage dump, so detectives guessed that their bodies could be connected and decided to investigate them together. The suspect in Sister Kathy Cesnik's murder was Reverend Father Maskell, who had already died around the time the reinvestigation was to commence in 2017. His body was exhumed by law enforcement officers, and his DNA samples were recovered. But upon further investigation, no connection was found with the death of Pamela and Sister Cesnik, and the exhumed samples did not match the DNA found at Pamela's crime scene. Whatever small hope they thought they had in 2017, they lost it. By 2023, the lieutenant in charge of the Maryland Police Department, Lieutenant Jackie Davies, opened a special police department to investigate cold cases with help from the FBI. In recent times, the FBI had adopted a new kind of investigation process to solve cold cases called genetic genealogy. As they went through all the cold case files before them, Pamela Lynn Conyers' file caught their attention because it had been sitting for over half a century, And when she died, there was no hope of getting any kind of information that could have helped. With the DNA sample collected from her body and car after she was found, FBI agents sprang into action. They sent the sample to Parabon Nanolabs, located in Reston, Virginia. The lab had gained fame and recognition after identifying a dismembered body from the 90s. The first line of action was to compare the DNA sample they had with those already registered in their database. But there was a 0% match. They were already hitting a wall before using their other option, which was to trace the culprit's lineage and find him through his family tree. To get this genealogical information, they would have to use genetic genealogy. With the bodily fluid they had retrieved from Pamela, they extracted DNA information and created a family tree from individuals that partially matched the DNA from the crime scene, although the FBI didn't release their identities. They were able to determine who the prime suspect was, because the more markers two individuals share, the more recent their common ancestor is likely to be. After finding the DNA matches, the FBI agents then employed genealogical research techniques to build the family tree of the suspect. They examined historical records and studied the ancestral connection between individuals. After further research by Tom Sobieski, the FBI agent in charge, they found a suspect. His name was Forrest Clyde Williams III. Forrest Clyde Williams III was born on December 12, 1948, to Forrest Clyde Williams Jr. and Doris Hypes Williams. He was born in Covington, Virginia, and grew up with 11 siblings. Forrest was a troubled child, as he almost always got into fights with his siblings, and it eventually led to him growing an obsessive and violent personality. His family moved to Anne Arundel when he was a teenager, and that's where he attended one of the public schools in the county. Forrest Clyde was a quiet kid, always hiding at the back of the class and avoiding people's gaze in class. He seemed to have a lot of anxiety, and his violent personality didn't make it easier for him to make friends. As he got older, he developed a love for hunting, fishing, and car racing. Although he didn't spend a long time in Anne Arundel before moving back to Virginia, he left his mark in the town. By the time he turned 24 years old, he had already been arrested multiple times for behaving disorderly while drunk. He had a drinking problem and would often get into trouble with the police because he couldn't stay out of bars and away from alcohol. Court records retrieved online didn't show records of that arrest, but revealed that he was arrested for fishing without a license. Forrest Clyde had a sense of entitlement towards everything, as he had the mindset that the world belonged to him. It would eventually affect his marriage, leading to a divorce, though there's no news on who his wife was or her whereabouts. But before his divorce, he had 3 children: Melissa Stinson, Kevin Wayne Williams, and his late son Ronnie Williams. As Forrest got older, he slowly drifted away from society and began to embrace everything old age brought him. With the new evidence obtained by the Maryland Police Department and the FBI, it was time to make an arrest. They tried to reach Forrest Clyde Williams, but were unable to, so they contacted his other family members, and none of them responded. Police continued to dig deeper into his identity until they were hit with shocking news. Forrest Clyde Williams III had died on March 28, 2018, at Lewisgate Hospital in Salem, Virginia. He died of natural causes and was 69 years old at the time of his death. His obituary revealed that before his death, he was at Scott Hill Assisted Living in Clifton Forge, Virginia. It turned out that he died a lonely death after being dropped at the assisted living home by his family. When information about Pamela Lynn Conyers' case was confirmed, the Maryland Police Department held a press conference to make the information available to the general public. Lieutenant Jackie Davies opened the live conference with a eulogy to Pamela Lynn Conyers. She said, "She was enjoying the essence of her teen years until her life was tragically and selfishly taken. To the family and loved ones of Pamela, we hope that today's announcement brings at least some degree of peace and comfort in finally learning who was responsible for her murder." The room fell silent as she continued the heartfelt speech she had prepared in honor of Pamela. Lieutenant Jackie continued by saying, "Pamela was never forgotten, nor will she ever be forgotten." She went on to appreciate the efforts of the detectives that worked tirelessly on the case, even if it had been dormant for over 50 years. Detective Tom Subikansky, the FBI agent in charge of the case, took to the podium after her. He started his statement by saying he was pleased to announce that justice could now be served for Pamela Lynn Conyers. In his statement, he said, "We are pleased to announce a measure of justice for Pamela Lynn Conyers." The detective went on to talk about the case. In his words, he said, "Pamela was a spiraling 16-year-old who went shopping at the mall. Her life was viciously taken away from her. Now, after half a century, the FBI, along with investigative genealogy, have been able to identify the man who killed Pamela." He then went on to give a brief about the investigative genealogy process. According to the detective, FBI agents used investigative genealogy when other investigative methods have been exhausted. For Pamela's case, that occurred in 1970. There weren't a lot of options available for them to find the killer. Using the investigative method, the detectives used crime scene DNA to create a profile and matched it with publicly available databases to identify the family of the suspect. But Detective Tom pointed out that although they had found the suspect and his family, it's still an ongoing investigation. However, he assured people watching that to law enforcement officers, victims are never forgotten. They would go to any length to bring a sense of justice to the surviving family members of those victims. Since the news of Pamela's killer came out publicly, her family refused calls and wanted people to respect their privacy in this period. WBAL, a local news network, was able to talk to one of Pamela's friends, Michael Golden. They met during the pep rally, and her natural friendly aura attracted him to her. When asked how he felt about the case, he said, "This is a case that has haunted me for close to 53 years. I remember distinctly when Pam went missing. I remember that Monday morning. I had trigonometry class with her, and seeing her empty desk really brought it home, made it real. I still mourn her death. I got to be old. She didn't. She's forever 16. Detectives believe that there may have been other people involved in Pamela's death, so they couldn't reveal too much information to protect the integrity of the case. It's still an ongoing investigation, and they're open to tips that could move the case forward. Investigators also pointed out that Pamela and Forrest Clyde Williams didn't know each other prior to her death. Therefore, the crime wasn't perpetuated by a friend or acquaintance. Before Forrest Clyde Williams' death, he requested to be cremated. His family honored his last wish and cremated his body, so police officers had only an old mugshot from when he was arrested in the 70s. They still can't reach his family. Since there was no arrest nor statement from Pamela's family, nobody knows if they got the closure they needed to start healing from the loss of their loved one. We hope they got some sort of closure. On July 15, 2005, 56-year-old Pamela Joseph had come back from work completely knackered. She had a long day at the cafe, and all she needed was a foot rub and some hours of sleep. Her children were already married and living away from home, so Patricia hoped that they would come meet her when they came visiting that day. But as she rested, an intruder broke into her house in Fort Jones. Afterwards, she disappeared, leaving her cell phone, glasses, and retainer behind. Her family spent the next 3 days looking for her, and the news they got shocked them to their bones. This is the story of Patricia Joseph that nearly tore down the Siskiyou District Attorney's Office. What happened to Patricia Joseph? Who were her assailants, and what was their motive? Fort Jones is a small town in the Siskiyou County of North California, and it only has a population of 647 people. It's impossible to claim not to know your neighbor because everybody knows everybody. This town has only one retail center, which houses different businesses and restaurants. Although it's quite small, Fort Jones is a great place to raise a family, as it's a tightly knit community and has good schools. It gives off a suburban-rural mix, and you could almost call it a village. But this village has a 15% violent crime rate, and Patricia Joseph's case happened to be the one that really shook the county. Patricia Joseph was born on June 25, 1949 in California, and was fondly referred to as Patty. She got married in her 20s and gave birth to 3 children, Allison, Steve, and Julie, who loved her dearly as she was a caring and loving mother. Whenever her kids were in trouble, she never hesitated to jump to their rescue, not just as a mother, but as a woman with a great sense of justice. Her children weren't the only people she defended in troubled times. She also showed up for her neighbors and their children, ensuring that no kid felt left out in the community. But apart from Patricia's love for her townspeople, she loved babies even more, and they loved her too. To some people, she played the godmother role, and to others, she acted as a grandmother. When her son gave birth to his first child, Patricia hurried to his house with gifts for the newborn. Patricia Joseph ran a restaurant in Fort Jones, Country Time Cafe, and it was located on Main Street. Although it's now covered by a mural, people used to love eating there as it had some of the tastiest food in the area. But the tasty food wasn't the only thing attracting people to the restaurant. Patricia's attitude and customer satisfaction was on a whole other level. Some families even ate there every day, and there were no bad reviews for her. Patricia was a single mother, running a single-income household, so she had another job working as a bush trimmer for a marijuana farm. She was diligent with her job as it offered some form of escape from the thought of sitting home alone all day as her children were already married and living in their own homes. Even if she wasn't making a lot of money at this job, she showed up consistently and completed her end of the deal. Patricia Joseph was also a dedicated and a hard worker, always looking out for her colleagues and boss, and ensuring that the people around her were comfortable at all times. She was a lovely and lively person to spend time with, but her community was caught unaware when they found out that they may never see her again. On Friday, July 15, 2005, Patricia Joseph had just come back from her restaurant. She had a long day managing orders and handling customers, so she had closed earlier than usual to rest. She had her bush trimming job to go to, but she decided to rest first so she could be at her best while out at work. But as she was resting, someone broke into her house and kidnapped her. Later that day, Patricia's family members started calling her, but didn't get any response. Patricia Joseph wasn't one to ignore a call, no matter how tired she was, so her family started to panic. They rushed down to her house, only to find the door unlocked, which was surprising. Since Patricia lived alone, she knew that her doors were supposed to be locked, and seeing it in that state increased their heartbeats. As her family walked into the house, they saw her phone that they had been calling and began to search around the house, calling her name and hoping for a response. But there was none. Before assuming the worst, they asked her neighbors if they had seen her, and the last they could remember was her walking into the house after coming back from work that day. They didn't see her leave the house. It was at this point her family realized that Patricia Joseph was missing. They immediately called the cops and reported her missing. After getting the call about Patricia's disappearance, detectives rushed to her house. Patricia had pretty much lived a happy life, and she was in her late 50s, so the possibilities of her taking her own life or running away from a house she lived at on her own were already ruled out. Detectives searched the house for clues and found a great deal of foreign DNA within the house, but could not identify whose it was. They also found some of her items left behind. According to the Willits News, Patricia Joseph vanished from her duplex apartment without taking her glasses, contact lenses, purse, or cell phone. Patricia had terrible eyesight, so it was impossible for her to leave the house without her glasses or contact lenses. In the hallway of the house, police found Patricia's false teeth laying on the floor. After seeing this piece of evidence, they thought that maybe it was a home invasion, and she was probably in the hands of kidnappers who wanted a ransom. But as they entered her room, they found drops of blood on her bed. Things were starting to get pretty intense at this point, as those were the only leads they had to work with. It was going to be hard to continue with the investigation, especially as they didn't know where Patricia was. The police had no clue as to whether she was alive or dead, or if she was kidnapped, as her family hadn't gotten any call demanding a ransom. On July 18, 2005, 3 days after Patricia went missing, some kayakers were at the Klamath River, but they spotted something unusual in the water, and as they got close, it was a half-clothed woman. They immediately called the cops to report what they had seen. As the cops got the call, they rushed to the Klamath River and retrieved the body. To their dismay, it was Patricia Joseph, tied up and bloated. She had been beaten severely, with strangulation wounds on her neck. Her cause of death was later proclaimed as asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. The detectives informed her family that they had found Patricia, but it wasn't how they hoped, as she was already dead. As her family went into a state of mourning, detectives started investigating. But even with this new information they had, they weren't making any progress in their investigation, and the case slowly grew cold due to a lack of solid leads for the detectives to follow up on. It wasn't until 2010 before the police would pick up the case again. As they began to sift through the evidence and determine who could have killed her, they found a lot of the physical DNA evidence from her house from the day of the incident pointed towards one individual, the man who owned the marijuana farm where she trimmed. Some witnesses who were too scared to say anything when the incident happened in 2005 also stepped forward anonymously to give their testimonies, which confirmed the police suspicion. His name was Philip William Fraze, and he was no first-timer to the police. Immediately, a warrant was released for his arrest. But prior to the release of the warrant, he was all ready to stand trial for the murder of 49-year-old Stephen Richard Schmidt. Stephen worked on Philip's marijuana farm too, and had died due to a blunt injury to his head, just like Patricia Joseph. His friends reported him missing and got suspicious of Philip after they saw him driving Stephen's car out of his property with rubber gloves. They asked him where Stephen was, and he claimed that he had moved away. The police got a warrant to search the house around late January 2010 based on Stephen's friend's statements and the fact that the missing person was an occupant of that house. But Philip claimed that there was nothing in his house. When police searched Philip's house, they found the body of Stephen Schmidt in his yard. He was tied up to a tree and hidden under branches where the cadaver dogs found him. And Philip was found guilty of the murder. They also found some of Stephen's belongings abandoned in front of an elk business. Philip William Frace eventually admitted to killing Stephen Schmidt and was sentenced to 3 years in prison at Mendocino County Jail. The police believed he killed Stephen Schmidt after they had an argument over his marijuana business. They connected the dots and opined that since Stephen died due to blunt force trauma, like Patricia, and they also had a business deal, then Philip was likely also responsible for her murder. Philip was to be transferred from the Mendocino County Jail to the Siskiyou County Jail after serving his 3-year prison term. But the Siskiyou County District Attorney revoked the warrant in 2012, claiming that the detectives didn't have enough evidence to make the arrest. The DA, Kirk Andrus, stated that more investigative work was necessary before bringing charges against Frace. In response to the pulling of the warrant, Patricia's oldest son, Stephen, told the Daily News, "My family is disappointed with the outcome of the proceedings, but we understand the district attorney's position. I appreciate the work that the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office is doing, and I know they are pursuing the case as aggressively as they can." Even if the detectives had worked hard on the case for 5 years and thought they had a killer, they realized that they didn't have enough evidence to prove anything. So they had to go back to the investigation board, and the case soon turned cold again. By early 2021, the Siskiyou County Sheriff, Jeremiah LaRue, created a cold case and forensics evidence team to assist major crimes detectives in their investigation. Although it took a while for the team to get to Patricia's case, they found it and began to go over the case file. Instead of going through the route of questioning witnesses, they cross-checked the DNA evidence that was already stored. When Patricia was found floating in the Klamath River in 2005, technology was not advanced enough to locate the culprit. But with new tech, detectives sent the physical evidence gathered on the day of the incident to a lab, and after checking the forensic evidence in their database, they found a match. But it turned out that Patricia Joseph wasn't killed by just one person. There were 2 men, but the police didn't reveal further evidence to support their findings. They haven't found who the other person was, but the main suspect was Philip William Frace, her boss at the marijuana grow. Philip William Frace was born in 1948 around the California area. He was a rebellious child, constantly going against every rule set for him. His parents weren't rich, so he didn't have a luxurious or even comfortable lifestyle as a child. But this made him decide to do whatever he needed to do to make money. It's no surprise that when he got older, he started a marijuana farm. He lived in Siskiyou County, and his first meeting with the law was in 1997. In 1997, Philip William Frace had started an illegal marijuana farm in California. Growing and selling of marijuana wasn't legal in the state until 2016, but Philip was way ahead of his time. However, it appeared that somebody snitched on Philip to the police, and they raided his illegal weed farm and gathered evidence against him. The mistake they made was to let him walk free while he awaited trial, because in that same period, he burgled a person's house and was arrested. He went to court for that case, and it ended in a mistrial because the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to find him guilty of burglary. He was later acquitted in the second trial and set free. Philip William Frace wasn't the kind of person to self-reflect or think of how his actions affected other people, because he continued to cultivate and sell marijuana. Apart from selling marijuana, he employed people to work on his farm and increase his profit. He called them his business associates, but would drop them once he suspected foul play or got tired of them. Philip was very money-minded, which always led him to take drastic decisions and get his hands dirty from time to time. He never got married, nor had any children. After sending the forensic evidence gathered from Patricia Joseph's house and the place where her body was found to a lab, the detectives in charge of her case were able to find a match in their database. They found Philip William Frace responsible for her death, and everything started to make sense. Patricia Joseph started to work for Philip William Frace around 2004, a year before she disappeared. When she went missing, police didn't question Philip because there was no correlations initially. But when they found new evidence in 2010 linking him to her murder, he denied ever seeing her. Shortly after Patricia's death in 2005, Philip moved to Mendocino County and continued his marijuana cultivation. The police assumed his relocation in 2005 was in an effort to run away after committing a heinous crime in Siskiyou County. On his new farm in Mendocino County, he got a new worker, Stephen Schmidt, and even housed him on his property. But after they had a dispute over money and a pound of marijuana, Philip used a lead pipe to hit the back of Stephen's head, killing him. They tried to find evidence that could link Stephen's death to Patricia's death, but nothing showed up. The detectives in charge of the case in 2021 confirmed that he was also responsible for Patricia's death because she was also killed with blunt force. After fixing the pieces of the puzzle together, they found compelling forensic evidence that found Philip William Frace guilty of kidnapping and murdering Patricia Joseph. A warrant for his arrest was released, but he went into hiding. All efforts to find him proved futile, and since he didn't have family members that the police could contact, their investigation simply got harder. But they finally had a breakthrough when they found evidence that proved he was hiding in Yreka, California. On February 6, 2023, Philip William Frace, now age 75, was arrested in Yreka, California for the murder of Patricia Joseph. The Siskiyou County Supreme Court wasted no time in starting Philip's criminal trial. 2 days after his arrest, he appeared in court on February 8, 2023 to receive his verdict. He appeared unfazed and unbothered in court, looking at the judge as if he didn't care about what was going to happen. If the jury didn't have evidence before them, they could have believed that the old man that stood before them was probably not responsible for the crime. But as the judge went through the piles of evidence before him, he found Philip William Frace guilty of all the charges against him. Even Philip's attorney couldn't make a reasonable argument for him. He was locked back up in the Siskiyou County Jail with a $2 million bail. For his accomplice, police have placed a $2,500 reward for whoever can provide them with information. When Philip William Frace was first accused of Patricia Joseph's murder in 2010, her family felt a sense of relief, until the warrant was pulled in 2012 and he was allowed to walk free. The detectives said they knew a dangerous killer was on the loose, but they were going to continue their investigation. Patricia's son was devastated, but he kept his hopes high and even created a Facebook page in honor of his mother. After Philip's second arrest in 2023, Patricia's family felt some sort of relief. In a Facebook post, they wrote, "We miss you like crazy," after his arrest. They continue to look for information about the second suspect in the murder of Patricia Joseph. There's no public information on the family of Philip William Frace, so no statement came from his family. If he's unable to pay the $2 million bail, he'll remain in jail. Sheriff LaRue of Siskiyou County expressed his joy at the progress that the cold case team made on Patricia Joseph's case. In his statement, he said, "This arrest is the result of the determination of our investigators and reflects our faithful commitment to pursuing justice for victims of violent crimes and their families. Our cold case team will continue to focus on these cases with dedication. I would like to commend everyone for their devotion to this investigation and thank the District Attorney's Office for their assistance. Our hearts are with Patricia's family, and we hope this arrest begins the path towards closure and healing." One of the kayakers that found Patricia Joseph's body, Daniel Fleury, said, "Wow, I thought this thing had just been shoved aside. This was one of the craziest days of my life. I found this lady in the river that day. I'm so glad I was there to catch you, and I'm so happy that they're still pursuing this for your family. Spread your wings and make a big pass over Siskiyou County." Although Patty's family and friends can never see her again, the arrest gave them some sort of closure. We hope they cope with the grief with ease. This is the cold murder case of Renee Sweeney, a 23-year-old student from Sudbury, Canada. The horrible incident took place on January 27, 1998, when she was brutally stabbed to death more than 30 times. As anticipated, the killer fled the scene, but left quite a few pieces of evidence behind. However, the case remained cold for 20 years, until a breakthrough in 2018 helped reveal the identity of the killer. For 2 long decades, the family of the victim longed for justice. This tragic end of a young woman, full of promise, whose life was suddenly snatched away, begs the question, what could have possibly led to such an insane act of violence? Was her killer someone she knew? Our case brings us to Sudbury, a Canadian city with a distinct blend of rich cultural heritage and recreational opportunities. Sudbury is known for its thriving cultural scene, with various museums and galleries that bring the city's history and traditions to life. However, despite the general safe reputation, no place is completely safe. The tranquility of Sudbury was shattered on a fateful day in January 1998 by a terrible crime. A 23-year-old student working at Adults Only Video was fatally stabbed, leaving the neighborhood in shock. Let's find out who the victim was and what happened that day. Born in 1975 in the heart of Sudbury, Ontario, a lively and ambitious personality named Renee Sweeney graced the world. Not much is known about her early life, but one thing that is known was her bonding with her younger sister, Kim Sweeney. Family connections were important in Renee's life, and her relationship with her sister Kim highlighted this deep closeness. They had their share of childish squabbles, but as they grew older, they grew closer. The two inseparable sisters would frequently spend time together, sharing meals and laughter. At the age of 23, Renee's life brought her through the hallways of Laurentian University, where she was a senior college student pursuing her higher education. Renee's life was a symphony of varied interests, aside from her academic achievements. She found refuge and satisfaction in performing with the Sudbury Symphony Orchestra, channeling her passion for music into captivating tunes. But Renee's individuality extended beyond her creative abilities. She took on an unusual profession as an employee at the Adults Only Video store on Paris Street. Despite the store's negative reputation, Renee took satisfaction in the fact that it was her source of income, and she was not involved in any questionable extracurricular activities. But no one knew that something was about to happen on the 27th of January that would shake the whole community. Sudbury, Ontario seemed like any other cold morning on that terrible January day in 1998. Renee Sweeney, a bubbly 23-year-old college student who worked at adult-only video, was going about her business. The day began like any other at the video store, where she worked alone in a relatively modest area covered with a selection of X-rated DVDs and movies. She had no idea that her life was about to take a disastrous turn. Renee's life would be forever changed around 11:15 a.m., as she was on the phone with an employee from another adults-only video store. She cut the call short, explaining that a customer had entered the store. This would be her last interaction with anyone except for her attacker. The man who entered the store, dressed in an ocean blue High Sierra brand jacket and Brooks brand tennis shoes, confronted Renee in the middle of the store and began a vicious attack, stabbing her repeatedly. Renee had remarkable resilience in the face of a brutal assault, putting up a courageous struggle for her life. Unfortunately, her strength couldn't equal her attacker's ruthlessness, and she eventually dropped to the floor, leaving a pool of blood behind her. Her assailant went to the restroom to wipe the evidence of his horrific crime off his hands and face. When he returned to the store, Renee had managed to drag herself behind the counter, urgently straining to call for help. Angry, he threw more strikes, eventually ending Renee's struggle with lethal stab wounds. Before departing, the assailant took $200 from the cash register and a few goods from the shop. The first person to witness the horrifying incident at the adults-only video store described his terrifying experience. He and his fiancée, both Laurentian University students, had scheduled a normal coffee break at Country Bagel, which was conveniently located in the same Paris Street strip mall where Renee Sweeney worked. When they arrived at the store at 11:30 a.m., they decided to rent an adult movie and went inside. As they walked in, they were met with an unnerving emptiness. The till in the back right corner had been abandoned, and numerous goods had been unceremoniously knocked off the shelf. Their attention was directed to a collapsed stand in the center of the store, holding DVDs and magazines. Peering over the stand, the witness saw a horrifying sight. A man stooping over someone on the floor, holding what appeared to be a blue bag in his right hand. The witness saw blood all around the individual on the floor, indicating a disturbing scene of violence. The man's actions, which included rapidly cramming goods into the bag, signaled a hasty exit. When the witness indicated his presence, the man ran by him without interaction or acknowledgement. The witness, startled and disturbed by the scene before him, dashed to the person lying on the floor, recognizing a woman in desperate need of assistance. He was determined to get help, rushing to a nearby shop to notify them that police and medical staff were needed. The witness report conveyed the ferocity and urgency of the incident, portraying the terrible aftermath of a heinous crime. A short while later, police arrived at the crime scene with tracking dogs. His escape path took him across Walford Road and across the parking lot of Laurentian Hospital. As he urgently tried to avoid capture, the killer fled over many neighborhood streets and across the grounds of two schools, Lockerbie Composite and McLeod Public. Tracking dogs tracked his movements, but he vanished near Caswell Drive, complicating the inquiry. While the murderer was able to escape, he left critical evidence at the crime site. The bloody footprints on the cash box, as well as the tissue and blood beneath Renee's fingernails, were evidence of her valiant fight against her assailant. A septic footprint was also discovered. A man's size 10 Brooks brand sports shoe, white with a black stripe, which assisted authorities in narrowing down probable suspects. She had been stabbed at least 35 times before her life was taken in a horrible and pointless act of violence. The killer's ocean blue High Sierra jacket was perhaps the most intriguing piece of evidence left behind. This lightweight jacket was not ideal for the harsh January weather of Western Ontario, which was an interesting quirk. Its origin provided another degree of intrigue to the case, because it was only available in the United States, at Mervyn's, a network of stores located fairly far from Sudbury. A strange item, an odd diaper pin, was put inside the jacket. The significance of this anomaly remained a mystery, leaving investigators puzzled. The witness described the person he encountered as having short, disheveled hair on the top of his head and wearing thin-rimmed, oval-shaped glasses. The man also had a few days' worth of beard growth on his face. Authorities then sketched the suspect based on the witness's testimony. They also informed Renee's family about her tragic death. I still think about it and her every day. I just keep having these same questions run through my head. Why would someone do this? Why her? Is he still out there? This is what Kim, Renee's sister, said upon discovering that her sister was stabbed to death. According to Sergeant David Toffoli, the case's primary investigator, Renee Sweeney fought against her attacker. DNA discovered under her fingernails revealed that she scratched the perpetrator several times during the struggle. These scratches would have been obvious because the assailant was fully clothed except for his face and neck. The investigation also turned up unsettling information that suggested someone was harassing or stalking Renee in the weeks preceding up to her tragic death. She had received multiple hang-up phone calls at her house in the 2 weeks preceding the murder, prompting fears about her safety. Her altered behavior raised even more doubts. Renee had typically parked her car on the opposite side of the parking lot, away from the store's location. But in the week before her death, she began parking immediately in front of the store, a change from her customary habit. Following the horrible murder of Renee Sweeney, the Greater Sudbury Police Department acted quickly, arresting and prosecuting John Federle with first-degree murder on February 11, 1998. The sole reason for his arrest was because the sketch made by the police, as described by the witnesses, resembled the appearance of John Federle. However, the investigation quickly found uncertainties, and the evidence didn't hold up, prompting officials to drop the charges and issue an apology, releasing Federle the next day. The investigation encountered roadblocks over the years, but the pursuit of justice continued. By December 2, 1999, hundreds of males had willingly provided their DNA to Sudbury police, resulting in the largest DNA collection for a single police investigation in Canadian history at the time. Despite ongoing attempts, the investigation became cold, and the trail of clues became stale. Sudbury Police developed the ReneeSweeney.com website on April 30, 2003, in the hopes of gaining information regarding the murder. The once-hot investigation eventually cooled over the years, leaving the town and Renee's family with lingering uncertainty. The Greater Sudbury Police Department made a startling announcement in 2017 that gave the relentless pursuit of justice in the Renee Sweeney murder case a sense of optimism. They published a new composite image of the culprit in collaboration with Parabon Nanolabs, a cutting-edge technological company specializing in DNA phenotyping, potentially taking them one step closer to solving the chilling crime that had gone unsolved for nearly 2 decades. On January 23, 2017, Greater Sudbury Police released a fresh sketch of the Sweeney murder suspect, which was made utilizing Parabon Nanolabs' revolutionary Snapshot DNA phenotyping service. This groundbreaking technology tried to predict looks and ancestry based on DNA samples, paving the stage for a novel approach to solving cold cases. The Snapshot DNA phenotyping service used advanced algorithms to analyze DNA samples gathered from the crime scene and construct a composite facial imaging sketch of a possible suspect. The composite image provided exceptional insight into the likely appearance of the individual responsible for the horrible deed that had shaken the Sudbury community and left Renee Sweeney's family in the dark. The composite drawing suggested that the suspect was most likely a male of Northern European heritage, with pale skin, appealing blue or green eyes, and hair that ranged from brown to blonde with a smattering of freckles. Based on eyewitness statements, eyeglasses were included in the image, further enhancing the portrait of the possible perpetrator. This revelation was a watershed moment in the investigation, reviving hope and sparking the public's curiosity. The improved composite image gave detectives a new lead, bringing back their determination to solve the long-standing mystery behind Renee Sweeney's miserable murder. Detective Sergeant Bob Weston, who was in charge of the Renee Sweeney murder investigation at the time, expressed gratitude for the public's tremendous response following the release of the new composite image in January of 2017. Before releasing the new sketch, the police had already cleared 1,800 people of suspicion, and they had received 360 tips in the previous year. Around 200 of those tips were eliminated by DNA analysis or other procedures, leaving approximately 150 tips under investigation. Despite the fact that every tip was valuable, Detective Sergeant Weston wished the public could provide more specific information. He reminded the community that while the composite image shows a young man, the killer was most likely in his 40s by now. Detective Sergeant Weston encouraged people to remember those they knew in 1998, in the hope that someone may have vital information that may guide the inquiry in the correct path. Despite the passing of 2 decades, he was hopeful that the case would be solved, with the DNA databank potentially playing a key role in identifying the perpetrator. This breakthrough had brought the case to a critical point, and all eyes were on the Greater Sudbury Police Service's tireless efforts. The suspect's once obscured face suddenly had a shape, a face that the community hoped would be identified soon, and a name that would offer long-awaited finality to a tragedy that had haunted Sudbury for far too long. Finally, in 2018, the results of Snapshot DNA phenotyping revealed Robert Stephen Wright to be the killer. At that time, he was 39 years old. He was apprehended and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Renee Sweeney's death on December 11, 2018, which was an important breakthrough in the 2 decades-long investigation into her murder. Wright attended Lockerbie Composite School. He was 18 years old at the time of the crime. His place of employment, the North Bay Regional Health Center, was the scene of the arrest. The trial was initially set to begin on October 25, 2021, but was repeatedly postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was finally rescheduled for February 21, 2023. Wright had a number of bail requests rejected in 2019, 2020, and 2022 while he was being held in custody following his arrest in December 2018. Considering his imprisonment during the pandemic and hospitalization for a serious COVID-19 infection, his almost 4.5 years of custody resulted in a pretrial custody credit of at least 6 years. The trial ultimately began on February 21, 2023, 25 years after Sweeney's untimely passing, after years of exhaustive efforts. Wright pleaded not guilty and testified during the trial that when he entered the store, it was dark and quiet. Upon approaching the counter, he saw a body lying on the floor, and there was a substance on the ground which was actually blood, but his brain couldn't process it at the time. He then told the jury that he moved towards the body to check the pulse rate, which he learned back in the days when he was a Boy Scout. Upon hearing no heartbeat nor the pulse, he got overwhelmed, and seeing blood on his jacket freaked him out. And so, he fled the scene of the crime out of panic, calling it the worst decision of his life. He adamantly denied being responsible for Sweeney's murder. Wright's defense attorney, Michael Lacey, put out a number of counter-arguments to prove his innocence, arguing that there's only one just verdict in this case to find Robert Stephen Wright not guilty. The jury came to a different conclusion, though, following 5 weeks of testimony. They deliberated for around 14 hours before finding Wright guilty of second-degree murder on March 29, 2023. The jury met again after returning a guilty verdict to discuss whether Wright should be ineligible for parole for a term ranging from 10 to 25 years. 2 jury members recommended a 20-year parole ineligibility period. 1 offered 22 years. 2 suggested 23 years, and 7 indicated 25 years. Justice Robbie Gordon, however, ruled that Wright will be eligible for parole after he served 12 years in prison. The conclusion of this significant trial put an end to Renee Sweeney's 25-year quest for justice. The perpetrator of this horrific event was made to answer for his acts. Although the perpetrator is now caught and is serving his life in prison, it doesn't change the fact that Renee is dead because of him. The only family left is her sister, Kim Sweeney. Kim Sweeney carries the weight of her sister Renee's brutal death with her every single day. The tragic event, which occurred years ago, continues to haunt her thoughts, leaving her with lingering questions that seem to have no answers. The memories of those minutes, days, and weeks following the devastating news are hazy, as grief often obscures the passage of time. Kim and her family have carried a heavy weight due to the lack of resolution. Her mother passed away in November 2017, never having the chance to find comfort and closure in the tragedy that befell her eldest daughter. The fact that her own young kids would never get the opportunity to meet their aunt and participate in the affection and memories that she holds dear is probably the most heartbreaking element of this tragedy. "What happened on that day, it wasn't necessary," she said. "It didn't need to go down that way. That was my sister, my mom's daughter. She had friends. She was a good student. She was a good person. My kids don't have an aunt to take them for ice cream and spoil them. I don't have any nieces and nephews to spoil." As we come to the end of this riveting real crime story, we can't help but wonder about the unsolved questions. Why was she stabbed to death in the first place? Did the perpetrator know her from before? What are your thoughts on the investigation's twists and turns? We'd love to hear what you think in the comments. On a fateful day of April 28, 1997, 39-year-old Monica Lynn Leech arrived at Western Financial Bank in Thousand Oaks, ready for another ordinary morning at work. Little did she know that her world was about to crumble into the most chilling and heart-wrenching way imaginable, when two armed men, their faces concealed by nylon masks, stormed into the bank. However, Monica was destined to encounter something even more horrifying. Unexpectedly, as Monica was being handcuffed, one of the individuals inexplicably shot her in the back of her head, carrying out a gruesome act of violence that ended her life. What dark secrets fueled the motive behind the chilling murder? What took it so long to solve the case? Thousand Oaks, situated in the northwestern part of Greater Los Angeles, is a city known for its picturesque surroundings and family-oriented atmosphere. Located approximately 15 miles from Los Angeles and 40 miles from downtown, the city derives its name from the abundance of oak trees that grace the area. The community of Thousand Oaks prides itself on maintaining a tranquil and well-maintained environment, catering to the needs of families. Renowned for its breathtaking natural beauty, excellent educational institutions, and overall high quality of life, Thousand Oaks offers residents a desirable place to call home. Thousand Oaks stands out as one of the safest cities in California, boasting a remarkably low rate of 0.69 violent crimes per 1,000 individuals. This statistic reflects the city's commitment to fostering a secure and peaceful community environment. Yet, amidst the serene facade, the tragic case of Monica Lynn Leech disrupts the very essence of this idyllic town. Her tragic story serves as a jarring contradiction, shattering the illusion of absolute safety and plunging the community into a profound sense of disbelief and sorrow. Monica Lynn Cavalletto Leech, born on September 15, 1957, to Alfred and Elaine Cavalletto, enjoyed a warm and religious upbringing as the middle child among her siblings. Growing up, Monica had a fondness for floral dresses and stories about angels, reflecting her gentle and compassionate nature. After graduating from Rio Mesa High School in Oxnard, California in 1975, Monica embarked on her professional journey. In 1977, she began working as a teller at a local bank in Oxnard. In the early 1980s, Monica married Jeff Mintz, and together they welcomed two children, Andrew Mintz in 1984 and Stephanie Mintz in 1987. While her married life initially appeared stable, the relationship eventually ended in divorce in the late 1980s. Seeking a fresh start, Monica's life took a positive turn when she encountered Floyd Leech at a church gathering. Their connection was immediate, leading to a blossoming relationship. After 7 months of dating, Monica and Floyd tied the knot in 1990. Despite initial apprehension from Floyd's two sons, they eventually forged a bond, and Monica maintained a cordial relationship with her ex-husband Jeff, who had custody of their children at the time. As Monica looked to prioritize her new family's safety, she received advice from loved ones to relocate to Thousand Oaks, a community known for its safety compared to the Oxnard region, where she had been working. Taking their suggestions to heart, Monica decided to seek employment closer to her family and joined Western Financial Bank in Thousand Oaks as a teller in 1997. She hoped that this move would provide security and allow her to be closer to her loved ones. Tragically, just 2 months into her new journey, Monica became the victim of a heinous crime, an event that would forever change the lives of those who knew and cared for her. On April 28, 1997, inside the Western Financial Bank located at 2920 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Monica was diligently carrying out her duties. It was early morning, with only the manager, Monica, and 2 other tellers present at the bank, as the security guards had not yet arrived. The sunlit morning unfolded innocently, lulling everyone into a false sense of normalcy. Yet within moments, the tranquility shattered into a harrowing nightmare. 2 individuals, disguised as construction workers with reflective vests and hard hats, entered the bank with their faces concealed by nylon stockings. The lack of plexiglass separating the employees from the customers left them vulnerable, like sitting ducks awaiting a violent crime. The armed men swiftly gathered the 4 bank employees and herded them into the vault room. 3 of the employees were handcuffed, while Monica remained uncuffed but was ordered to open the vault. However, what followed next was beyond anyone's expectations. Monica, gripped by fear, obediently complied with the robbers' demands. As she unlocked the vault, her trembling hands betrayed her anguish. Helplessly, she was forced to kneel, her wrists tightly bound behind her back, a captive to their ruthless control. But fate, in its unfathomable cruelty, reserved a sinister twist for Monica alone. In a heart-rendering act of inexplicable violence, the masked assailant callously pressed the barrel of a gun against the back of her head, and with a single, irreparable pull of the trigger, extinguished her vibrant spirit forever. The other employees, their gaze fixed straight ahead as demanded, remained oblivious to the nightmarish scene unfolding behind them. The deafening silence was shattered by the haunting thud of Monica's lifeless body hitting the floor. A collective gasp escaped their lips, their hearts seizing with shock and disbelief. Compliance offered no sanctuary for Monica, and even in the face of cooperation, Monica had been callously robbed of her life. The 2 criminals swiftly fled the scene, making their escape in a car, leaving behind the chilling traces of their atrocious crime. Upon arriving at the scene, the police immediately initiated a thorough investigation. The lifeless body of Monica was discovered in the vault room, confirming her tragic demise from a single gunshot to the back of her head. The police also uncovered that the robbers had managed to escape with $9,000 in stolen funds. Determined to bring justice to Monica's memory, the authorities turned to the bank officials, urgently requesting access to the surveillance footage captured during the incident. Although the footage was of mediocre quality, it offered glimpses into the events that transpired inside the bank. The images were carefully extracted and sent to the police department, where experts worked attentively to create definitive portraits of the masked robbers. These images were subsequently distributed throughout the town in hopes of generating leads. Fortune smiled upon the investigators, for the robbers' escape was soon marred by a fortuitous turn of events: a traffic collision. The collision, a twist of fate, offered a precious lead in the relentless pursuit of justice. Despite the vehicle used in the crime having been hastily repainted, the keen eyes of law enforcement triumphed as they successfully tracked down the car, promptly seizing it for thorough examination, a crucial piece in the intricate puzzle of the investigation. In response to the heinous crime, the local banks and generous donors rallied together, raising a substantial reward amount of $160,000 for anyone who could provide information leading to the identification and capture of the suspects. Despite the initial momentum and the collection of significant evidence, such as composite sketches of the robbers and the discovery of the getaway car, the investigation eventually hit a dead end, and the case went cold. During the 1990s, Southern California experienced a surge in crime, with bank robberies reaching alarming levels. In 1992 alone, the FBI recorded over 2,600 bank robberies, averaging 7 per day. Gangs from South LA began expanding their criminal activities to areas like Thousand Oaks, creating a sense of unease in the once peaceful community. Floyd Leech, the grieving husband of Monica, refused to succumb to the passage of time. Despite the years that had mercilessly slipped away, Floyd's determination blazed like an eternal flame, refusing to let the case fade into the depths of oblivion. Moved by Floyd's unyielding dedication and the indomitable spirit he embodied, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, recognizing the lingering shadow of unresolved sorrow, made a resolute decision. They would rekindle the embers of the past, meticulously re-examining the old evidence that had lain dormant for far too long. In the face of the relentless passage of time, the wheels of justice began to turn once more, as the collective determination of Floyd, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, and the echoes of an unfulfilled promise merged into a resounding call for truth and closure. Before delving into forensic tests, the police conducted an interview with the Crips, one of the oldest gangs in the Southwest Angeles area. Given the proximity to the crime, the police suspected their involvement from the outset. Perry Dedeaux, a prominent member of the Crips, provided insights during the interview. While acknowledging his notorious past and significant prison time served, he claimed to have turned his life around. When questioned about Monica's tragic bank robbery and murder, Dedeaux suggested that it bore the hallmarks of gang activity, yet he couldn't provide specific names of those involved. However, he acknowledged the influence of desperation in driving such heinous acts. While he didn't condone their actions, he believed that the seeds of desperation, sown by poverty and challenging circumstances, often served as the catalyst for certain individuals to embark on a path of crime. Dedeaux's statement shed light on the potential motive behind the murder, hinting at the role of desperation. While it didn't excuse the crime, it provided the police with a clearer understanding of the possible underlying factors. Despite all the theories, the case remained unsolved, leaving Floyd in a state of ongoing anguish and distress. After 24 long years, a flicker of hope emerged in 2021, offering the possibility of a long-awaited breakthrough in the case. Untouched evidence meticulously stored all these years could finally undergo retesting using cutting-edge DNA extraction technology, capable of unveiling even the most minute traces of genetic material. This remarkable development rekindled a renewed sense of optimism within the investigators, fueling their unwavering resolve to unearth the truth and provide the closure that Monica's case so desperately deserved. In 2021, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office Forensic Services Bureau initiated a re-examination of the evidence gathered many decades ago. Utilizing state-of-the-art technology, they successfully linked minuscule traces of DNA obtained from items such as the handcuffs. Despite the examination progressing rapidly, the process remained intricate and complex. However, after 2 years, in 2023, the department finally traced the sample DNA to a suspect. When the department was asked as to how they were able to track down the suspect, Christina Castoligina, a forensic scientist and local CODES administrator, explained the concept of touch DNA and its significance in investigations. She stated that touch DNA refers to the cells left behind when someone touches an item, containing a smaller amount of DNA compared to bodily fluids like blood or saliva. Advances in technology have made it possible to detect even trace amounts of DNA, making touch DNA analysis a valuable tool, especially when other evidence is scarce. The breakthrough in the case occurred when the DNA traces found at the crime scene matched with Kevin Ray James, a 55-year-old individual. On March 10, 2023, James was arrested at his residence in San Bernardino and taken into custody by the authorities. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office announced that he was a suspect in the killing of Monica Leech, which had remained an unsolved case for over 2 decades. James was being held in pretrial detention without bail at the Ventura County Jail. He was charged with first-degree murder in the commission of a robbery, reflecting the seriousness of the alleged crime. The arrest and subsequent charges represented a significant milestone in the investigation, and it brought hope for justice for Monica Leech and her loved ones. Kevin Ray James made his first appearance in Ventura County Superior Court on March 13, 2023, for an arraignment. However, he declined to enter a plea at the time. His next court date was scheduled for April 13, 2023, indicating that the legal proceedings are ongoing. While Kevin Ray James has been arrested and taken into custody in connection with the murder of Monica Leech, his specific role in the robbery and killing is still unclear. The investigation will continue to gather evidence and build a strong case against him to determine his level of involvement and seek justice for Monica's death. At present, no updated information regarding the identity of the second suspect has been disclosed to the public. The authorities are undoubtedly engaged in tireless efforts to identify and capture this individual involved in the heinous crime. The urgency surrounding the case is evident, as both the FBI and Crime Stoppers have offered substantial rewards amounting to $30,000 and $100,000 respectively for any information leading to the apprehension of the second suspect. Until both perpetrators are brought to justice and the case finds its resolution, it will continue to haunt the realms of unsolved mysteries, perpetuating the yearning for closure and truth.